When I was 17, I didn't feel good about myself. I found it hard to make friends and felt like no one noticed me, especially not boys. I made many friends online in chat rooms, back in the early 2000s. During one summer, I was staying with my sister to help her out because she injured her leg at a fair, and taking care of my two nieces and nephew was too much for her alone. This meant I could use the computer all night. I felt pretty lonely because I had just moved from my old school after my mom and stepdad split up, and I couldn't see my friends much because of everything going on. I chatted with a few guys, even video chatted sometimes, but nothing serious. I met this guy who said he was from Florida. He wouldn't say how old he was or send a photo, but he made it sound like he was older because he mentioned living in his own place. He said his camera was broken, which sounded believable at the time. He even suggested I visit him, promising to buy me a ticket so we could hang out. He seemed really interested when I told him I hadn't been with anyone before. After a week of talking, he persuaded me to show a bit of skin on camera. It took a lot of convincing, and he kept saying, "It's just me, don't worry." I regretted it, but at the moment, it didn't seem like a big deal. I never did it again, but we kept talking. As summer ended, my sister got better and didn't need my help, so I stopped spending nights at her place. Then, a couple of weeks before school, my best friend Mia called with shocking news. She asked, "Why am I seeing a picture of you like this?" I was stunned. At first, I didn't understand what she meant. All I could do was ask for details, and she explained that a guy sent her a photo of me, and it was clear it was the guy I had been talking to. Mia and some other friends received the same photo. It turned out this guy had somehow got into my account and taken my friend's contacts. My neighbor saw the photo too. He came up to me, really kind, saying he understood because he has a sister my age. He promised not to tell my mom, which was a relief, but still, it was so shameful. I pleaded with him to keep it a secret, and thankfully, he agreed. Mia had to sneak into her parents' email because the guy had hacked her contact list too and sent it to everyone she knew, including her parents. Luckily, her parents never saw the photo, and we managed to keep the whole mess pretty quiet. Only our friends knew what happened. When I finally got back online, I found tons of messages from him. I asked him why he did it, and he said he was angry because I hadn't replied to him. He was upset that I stopped talking to him. I told him he destroyed my life, and all he could say was sorry before he blocked me. He never contacted me again or sent out more photos, but about 20 or 30 kids from my old school saw that picture. I was thankful I didn't go to that school anymore. However, every time I visited and walked around town, I'd see people from school. I could tell they knew. They would point and laugh, and I've never been more grateful for not having a computer at home. I stopped using my online profile, even when at Mia's or my sister's place. To the grown man who tried to wreck my life when I was just a high schooler because you felt rejected, I hope you got caught. I wish that all the bad things you wanted for me happened to you instead. I pray we never meet again. This story is a warning to everyone about the dangers lurking online, and the horror isn't always in the shadows, but in the screens we stare at every day. I was a very shy girl in my early years of high school. So shy, I would hide behind my mom and dad when we walked into school because I didn't like all the students staring at me as I entered the classroom. Luckily, I started making friends who liked the same things I did, and they became very close to me. I still talk to many of them even after we finished school. But there was one person, Teddy, I wish I never became friends with. At first, he seemed like the rest of us, loving cartoons and drawing and a bit quiet. I didn't notice anything strange about him back then, and I was nice to him. Looking back, I realized there were warning signs I missed. We were all a bit awkward, and I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, which made social situations hard for me. But Teddy was different. His awkwardness was something else, but I didn't see it at that time. After a few months, Teddy and I started to like each other more. We began dating, but we were just kids. Still, it felt serious. He was very sweet at first. For example, right before Valentine's Day, he surprised me with lunch, a cute octopus toy, and a heartfelt card during our school break. I was touched, but also felt guilty because I hadn't gotten him anything. Looking back, that was the first sign something was off. Teddy became very obsessed with me quickly. While we dated, he got more and more clingy. I'm okay with a bit of clinginess, but Teddy was too much. He always had to be close to me, holding my arm or hugging me. Some friends thought it was sweet, but others, and eventually I, found it too much and strange. It made me uncomfortable and pushed me away from him. I felt in my gut that I shouldn't keep dating Teddy. My instincts, mixed with my strong anxiety that I hadn't yet gotten help for, made me realize I didn't like him that way anymore. I'm not someone who likes confrontations or drama, so the thought of telling Teddy we should just be friends again made me very nervous. We had become close so fast. Eventually, though, we did break up, but it hadn't been a long relationship. You might think being friends again would be easy, right? But with Teddy, it wasn't like that at all. At first, I thought everything was fine, and we could move past our short time as a couple. But I was wrong. Teddy didn't leave me alone. He wasn't too close, but he was always there, around me, especially when I was with my friends at lunch or in class. He kept staring at me. Sometimes I'd feel his gaze so intensely, and when I looked back, he'd quickly pretend to be busy with his laptop or notebook. This situation made me very uncomfortable. A brave friend of mine even told Teddy to back off and leave me alone because his behavior was too much, and it was clear we couldn't be friends anymore. I hoped that would be the end of it, but something happened that I still remember very clearly. One day, right before the end of lunch, I decided to head to my next class early. In Australia, where this happened, it was the last class of the day. I was alone, heading up a large stairway to my class, and suddenly Teddy appeared behind me. He tapped on my shoulder, and even though we were just steps away from the busy courtyard, I felt trapped. It was as if I was in a cage, alone with him. I realized he must have been following me to know I was alone at that moment. His presence and the way he spoke to me, wanting to talk alone now that my protective friend wasn't there, scared me. I wish I'd been braver back then. I should have told him to leave me alone, that I didn't want to hear anything he had to say, and that I needed to get to my class. But my anxiety and my wish to be kind to everyone stopped me from speaking up. Instead, I stayed silent as he grabbed me and pulled me to the side of the stairway, pressing our arms against the cold stone walls. I haven't mentioned this, but I'm very short, only 4'7" tall now, and I was even shorter back then. This detail is important because Teddy used his height to block me, making it difficult for me to leave and hiding me from anyone who might pass by. Then he took out a letter he had written for me. He insisted on reading it aloud, saying it would help me understand him better. Listening to him read that letter made my anxiety worse with each word. To summarize the letter, he wrote, "Dear Cherry, I'm sorry I couldn't make you happy. I miss giving you hugs and gifts. You deserve all the love in the world, and I wish I could be the one to give it to you. Please give me another chance. I promise to change, to become the perfect man for you. I'll even start going to the gym if you want. I just want to make you happy, so maybe one day we can wake up together, married." These weren't his exact words, but the idea of him wanting to change for me, dreaming of marrying me after only a few weeks of dating, was clear. As a young girl, hearing him plan our future, believing he could become the ideal man for me, was terrifying. It made my heart sink. He looked at me, waiting for a response, but his gaze felt creepy. It was then I realized how obsessed he was with me, and it hit me all at once. When the lunch break ended, the bell rang, but it was unlikely anyone would come to this stairway. It led to 2 rarely used classrooms and a teacher's lounge that not many visited, leaving me pretty much alone with Teddy. My fear and anxiety peaked, making me freeze instead of reacting. Unable to respond or escape, I broke down crying in front of him. Teddy was clearly surprised by my reaction, not knowing what to do next. He started to reach out, possibly to hug me, but that was the last thing I wanted from someone who had scared me so much. Just then, 2 girls I didn't know appeared. They saw the distress I was in and immediately intervened. Teddy tried to downplay the situation, but they weren't fooled. They scolded him fiercely, one confronting him directly while the other comforted me. With their help, I was pulled away from the situation, still crying and unable to speak properly. I later learned that my class location had changed to the library on the other side of our large school. These kind girls didn't mind being late to their own classes. They were determined to ensure I got to mine safely. I was deeply grateful for their kindness, strangers who became protectors in that frightening moment. After that distressing encounter, Teddy stopped talking to me and keeping his distance, which made my school days much more bearable. However, deep inside, I remained fearful he might confront me again when I was alone, though thankfully that never happened. At first I was worried about his return, but since we were in senior year with different elective classes, our paths rarely crossed, except in one literature class. Our literature teacher wasn't fond of Teddy, evident from his poor performance and lack of seriousness towards the subject, which eventually led to his removal from the class. Although I felt slightly bad for him, considering his apparent mental health issues, I was relieved when he was no longer in my class, as he had started to give me uncomfortable stares. The only other time we were in the same class again was when my math class merged with his due to teacher absence. I felt his gaze on me again, but I stayed focused on my work with my friend. His behavior throughout senior year, including being suspended for taking inappropriate photos of girls and dating someone much younger, only confirmed his unsettling nature. Reflecting on my experience with Teddy and a subsequent abusive relationship in 12th grade has made it challenging for me to trust and feel comfortable in relationships. However, I'm grateful to have found someone who respects me and helps me overcome my past traumas. We're celebrating our 1-year anniversary soon. This experience taught me the importance of recognizing red flags and trusting my instincts for my safety. My encounter with Teddy could have escalated, and I was fortunate to have strangers intervene during a critical moment. My advice to anyone in a similar situation is to prioritize your safety and well-being above all else. My friend Mike had been chatting with a girl named Sarah from England on the internet for over a year. Sarah seemed really nice, with a lot of friends and a caring family. She shared tons of pictures and stories about her life, making her seem very real. Her friends and family would leave comments on her social media, talking about their fun weekends, making plans to meet up, apologizing for missed calls, and wishing her happy birthday. Mike started to fall for Sarah and even told his parents and close friends about her. He would buy many phone cards to talk to her when they both could. About 9 months later, Sarah told Mike she was thinking about moving to the USA to be closer to him, and they even talked about living together. She said she had discussed it with her parents, and they suggested she should visit with a friend first to see if she liked it. Mike was thrilled. He couldn't stop talking about Sarah, how wonderful she was, and how she planned to visit for a week. Everyone should meet her, he said. When Mike went to the airport to pick up Sarah and her friend, Sarah wasn't there. Instead, he met 2 people who introduced themselves as Lily and Jack, claiming to be siblings. They said Sarah got too scared to fly over to meet Mike and switched her ticket with Jack's at the last minute. Lily and Jack were there to see if Mike was who he said he was and to check out the place for Sarah. After coming back home, Mike chatted online with Sarah, who kept saying sorry. Mike told her it was all right and that he understood her fear. I met Lily and Jack at a party Mike threw. He was showing them around, hoping they'd tell Sarah good things about him and his friends. Lily and Jack seemed normal, sticking together, having beers, laughing and talking to people. They took a lot of photos, which we thought was for Sarah. But a couple of days before they were supposed to leave, Lily and Jack told Mike the truth. Or at least, what they claimed was the truth. Their real names weren't Lily and Jack. They weren't siblings. And Sarah didn't exist. Sarah was actually someone named Alicia. All the pictures and stories about Sarah were stolen from Alicia's social media. The comments under Sarah's posts were all fake, made up by these pretend friends and family members. Alicia had no clue about any of this. She didn't know Mike existed. Lily and Jack then told Mike there was a fake profile for him too, named something like Justin. This fake profile had all of Mike's real friends and family, but under different names. They admitted to being part of a game, along with about 20 other people from around the world. The scariest part was when they showed Mike a book. It was like a book of Mike's life, but for this game. Every single detail Mike had shared with Sarah was in that book. There were parts of their conversations, like when Mike mentioned hanging out with his best friend, John. "I hung out with John today. He's my best buddy," to which Sarah replied, "Oh, Is that the friend in your profile picture? And right there, information about John was noted, alongside photos and a quick description of his relationship with Mike. The footnotes in the book were shockingly detailed. For John, it listed stuff like 1. Dating Emily R., see page 24, 2. Played in a band with Chris L., see page 15, and Alex D., see page 10. 3. Is the younger brother of Steve M., see page 12. The amount of interconnected information in this book was overwhelming. It was a vast network of friends and family, full of photos and details. Lily and Jack said they took all the photos during their visit so they could update this book in the fake online profiles. Mike refused to return the book to them and forced them to leave his house. He felt betrayed and deeply hurt. Later, Mike tried to confront Sarah online, telling her he knew the truth, that everything was a lie, and he demanded to know why. But Sarah went silent, never replied, and Mike was left without any explanation for what had happened. Before Mike destroyed the book, I saw it. There was a section about me with a photo and some details. 1. Recently moved from a small town in California. 2. Dating Kevin S., see page 7, who's a local police officer. 3. Close friends with Lisa M., see page 27, and Max T., see page 22. 4. Likes hiding snacks, wearing flip-flops, loves the Harry Potter series, drinking beer and eating cookies. When I was 19, I still lived at home while working 2 jobs to save up some money. One was at a fast food place, and the other was in a store. I was also very sad. Something very bad had happened to me the year before, and I was finding it tough to cope. My way of dealing with my sadness wasn't great. I slept with a lot of people, drank too much, and smoked weed often. I stopped keeping track of how many people I had been with after the number reached the 40s. I used to meet people through a well-known website for people interested in more extreme kinds of relationships. There, I started talking to a man named Tom. We first met in a park. Tom was a bit odd, but didn't seem harmful. I told him right away that I didn't want anything serious, just a casual thing. I also liked that he was older, 27, and could buy me drinks with my money. After a few weeks, Tom told me he had autism, which was fine by me. I've met many people who are on the spectrum, and they're just like anyone else. Everything seemed okay until I discovered some of my coworkers knew Tom. They were about his age, which didn't surprise me, but I was curious. My boss said Tom was odd. A coworker from another department told me he had always made her feel uncomfortable. Another coworker, who I worked with a lot, said Tom tried to break up him and his boyfriend multiple times. This was new to me. I didn't know Tom was interested in both men and women, and frankly, it didn't matter. I confronted Tom about what he was doing, and he told me some half-truths about having a crush on my coworker. I asked him to leave them alone since they were just engaged. During this time, I met someone named Jake at my fast food job, and I really liked him, so I started to see less of Tom. Of course, Tom didn't take this well and started acting strangely. He even claimed he heard voices. I told him I was studying psychology, but was definitely not qualified to help him, and I didn't really want to. However, I suggested he seek professional help and recommended my therapist. Tom said he had already seen them when he was younger, and they had diagnosed him with serious issues but didn't help him much afterward. The story got weirder and more unsettling from there. One day, I decided to ask my therapist if she or her husband had ever diagnosed a young person with a very rare condition called APD, as Tom claimed. She said they hadn't because it's quite rare. When I asked Tom about his lies, he denied everything, but kept talking about his mental health. I was just there to listen because I wasn't trained to give advice. Then, Tom told me something shocking. He believed he was a 300-year-old vampire from Nazi times who did terrible things during World War II. He thought he had lived another life where he hurt many people. I told him he needed to get serious help if he was having these thoughts and fake memories. Tom also said he dreamt about my parents' dogs attacking him, and even dreams where he hurt me. I felt scared and made an excuse to leave quickly. After talking to my boyfriend Jake and my parents, I stopped all contact with Tom. I was moving in with Jake anyway, so it was time to end things with Tom. But Tom didn't stop. He sent many texts and left voicemails. I recorded one where he begged me not to leave him. Things were quiet for a few days, and I thought he had given up until he showed up at my fast food job one evening. I ran to hide in the back, and my boss let me stay there after I explained a bit of the situation. Jake came to make sure I was safe and confronted Tom outside, telling him I didn't want to see him again. Tom said he was just there for the food, but Jake told him to go somewhere else. When I got home, I told my parents everything. They said I should get a restraining order. Jake, my work friends, and I went to the police to file a report. My uncle, who used to be a lawyer, found a friend to help me legally. They talked to Tom's lawyer, and they agreed Tom would stay away from me and my job, or he'd face legal consequences. In the end, he kept his distance. It was a scary time in my life, and I'm glad it's over. Let me start by telling you, I've never been the type to catch on to things quickly, especially not in the tricky situations life sometimes throws at us. I've been too trusting and naive for my own good, which has gotten me into trouble more times than I care to admit. But nothing compares to what happened after I ended things with my boyfriend in a really ugly breakup. Suddenly, I was living by myself, feeling lonely and out of place. I didn't have many friends nearby, so I spent a lot of time online. That's how I met Liam. We hit it off pretty quickly, and it turned out he lived close by, a 30-minute walk away. We decided to meet the next day and see if we clicked in person. I called my friend Lisa, who's always been more cautious and skeptical than me, and told her about my plans. She insisted on tagging along, worried that Liam could be dangerous or something. So, the next day, Lisa and I met with Liam at a local pub around noon. It was a hot summer day, so we chose to sit outside. The pub was packed, even though it was just lunchtime, but it was located next to a busy street, so we felt safe. We ordered food and drinks, and the conversation flowed easily. We laughed, shared stories, and took turns buying rounds of drinks, a common practice here where one person treats the group, then the next person does the same. As the day turned into evening, the pub got more crowded, but we hardly noticed time passing. We were enjoying ourselves, now several beers in and feeling quite tipsy. Liam went to buy another round, and the next thing I knew, I woke up the next morning in my own bed, my face throbbing and blood-stained sheets all around me. Panic set in as I realized I had no memory of what happened after 8 p.m. the previous night. I didn't know where the blood came from or why I was in pain. Cautiously, I went to the mirror. My face was a disaster. I looked as if I'd been in a brutal fight and lost. One eye was swollen shut, my lip was split, and one side of my face was scraped and bruised. I felt nauseous from the shock. What in the world happened? As I walked to the bathroom, something caught my eye. Liam, completely naked, asleep on my couch. At that moment, fear and confusion overwhelmed me, and I started screaming at him, demanding an explanation. After some time, he managed to calm me down and started to explain. He said that I had gotten extremely drunk the night before, making a fool of myself, slurring words, and stumbling around until I fell over a picnic bench, hitting my head hard. According to him, I was bleeding and refused anyone's help, so he decided to act the hero, called a cab, and took me home. I couldn't believe any of this was happening. Not a single memory of the previous night was in my head. I was full of questions, yet I found myself speechless. I knew I had drunk a bit, but it wasn't more than what I usually had during a night out. Could it really just have been too much alcohol this time? That seemed to be the only answer. I stared at Liam, my heart racing, until I finally blurted out that I felt sick. Liam took care of me that morning, recounting the silly things I supposedly did last night, and how I wouldn't have made it back without him. After eating and getting dressed, I felt a bit better, and he suggested going to his place for dinner to continue our date from where it got messed up by my blackout. Agreeing seemed like a good idea at the time. I admit, I've always been too trusting for my own good, lacking awareness of my surroundings. We arrived at his place in the late afternoon, but it wasn't really a house. It was a static caravan in a park. The inside was okay, but something about it felt off. It was small, with an open layout leading from the living room to the kitchen and dining area, then to a small hallway with 2 bedrooms and a tiny bathroom, ending at the back door. Sitting in the dining area while Liam cooked, I felt increasingly awkward, remembering nothing from the previous night. It felt like he had some power over me, knowing more about what happened than I did. I decided I would eat and then find a way to leave politely. I was questioning my decision to come here. As I was lost in thought, Liam asked how I was feeling. Without thinking, I muttered, "I feel like I've been drugged." His reaction was explosive. He accused me of accusing him, saying I was trying to ruin his life and get him sent back to jail since he was on parole. I was shocked to learn he had a history of domestic assault. He began smashing things in the kitchen, plates against the wall, a toaster on the floor, all while I sat frozen at the table. When I tried to leave, he attacked me, shoving and hitting me, blocking the way to the front door. I managed to run to a small room, locking myself in, but there was no way out. He pounded on the door, hurling insults. I pushed back against the door, terrified, as he tried to break it down. Eventually he stopped, and I could hear him moving around the living room, even turning on the TV, acting as if nothing had happened. As quietly as possible, I opened the door a crack to look outside. The hallway was dark, and the living room door was closed. I was alone, but the only exit was past where he might be. I remembered the back door and tiptoed toward it, hoping it wasn't locked. Luckily, it was open. I couldn't believe my luck. I quietly stepped outside, closing the door without making a sound, and then I ran as fast as I could. Tears mixed with fear as I found myself in an unfamiliar part of town, completely lost in the dark. I spotted a payphone and used the last bits of change I had to call my friend for help. My bag, money, and some personal things were still in Liam's place, but I left everything behind. My friend picked me up, and I cried all the way home without explaining what happened. At home, I just went straight to bed, crying myself to sleep. The next morning, I checked my phone, which I'd left at home, to find it flooded with about 50 messages from Liam. He was threatening to burn my house down, harm my family, and even kill me if he ever saw me again. I was terrified and deleted all the messages, wishing for all of it to just disappear. I kept the whole incident to myself, mostly. Days passed, and Liam's texts continued, ranging from threats to apologies, saying he loved me and was sorry. I deleted them immediately and eventually changed my number. Thankfully, he stopped contacting me after that. I later talked to Lisa and found out she also couldn't remember anything from that night after 8 p.m. Her boyfriend found her confused and scared, based on a disturbing voicemail she left him. He found her in a state of shock, wandering a nearby neighborhood. I know we should have told the police or someone about what happened. There were many things we could have done differently, but I just wanted to forget and move on. It felt like the most unreal experience of my life, sometimes making me question if it really happened because it was just too unbelievable. In 2013, I met a woman on a dating site, who I'll call Jane for this story. From the start, we got along really well. She was full of life, loved the outdoors, and was always eager to explore the world around us. For nearly a year, everything was great. Jane had a little boy, about 4 years old, who took to me right away. I was even starting to save up money to buy a ring and propose to her. But then, problems began to surface. She was fighting with her ex over who would take care of their son. She told me her ex was a bad person, who had threatened her and tried to run her over when she tried to leave him. On the day they were supposed to go to court, Jane broke down crying and became very upset. Before the judge arrived, she shouted, "You win! I'm done! You can take him! I don't care anymore! I can just have another baby!" Or something like that. Everyone in the room was shocked. I managed to calm her down before the judge came in. Her lawyer did all the talking, and in the end she was granted shared custody. Then, I found out she had been charged with assault before, but no details were given. I thought maybe it was just a tough situation with her ex, and she was stressed. But I started to worry about her mental state and whether it was a good idea to start a family with her. Still, I wanted to support her. As time went on, I encouraged her to reach out to her friends, since she often talked about them. Yet I never met any of them, nor talked to them, or even saw a photo. It seemed like her world only included me, her son, and her parents. I thought she really needed friends to feel better in her mind. Then, one day, she suddenly said she was going to spend a night out with some old friends from her school years. I was glad for her and I told her to have a good time. That night out happened, but the things she told me about it didn't add up at all. Later, I visited her parents and talked to them. They were confused and said they knew nothing about these so-called friends. In fact, these friends didn't exist. When I asked her about it, she confessed she had met a man, an old school friend, and they had spent time at a certain coffee place until late, talking over hot apple cider. But the coffee place she mentioned didn't even sell that drink, and it closed much earlier than she said. I realized she wasn't telling the truth, and she suggested we should just be friends but still do things together like a family without being romantic. We broke up after that. A few days later, she called me, crying, begging to get back together. She was very upset and even said she might harm herself if we didn't reunite. She had left her son with her mother and hadn't been seen for days. I found out she was calling from a very expensive hotel. I asked the hotel staff to get the police to check on her because she might be in danger. Weeks later, she showed up at my house, wanting to get back together and suggesting we could even add another woman to our relationship. I refused and closed the door on her. Then she went to my parents' house and made up stories about me. My parents didn't believe her and told her to leave. Not long after, my and my parents' phones wouldn't stop ringing with calls from her, especially when I was having dinner at their place. We had to turn off our phones. Later, we listened to her messages. She was saying she was lost in the woods near my parents' house. Her phone was dying and she needed help. We called the police again, and they found her not too far from my parents' house, close to a busy road. Was that the end of it? No. For 4 months, there was silence from her. I thought everything with her was finally over, and I had started to see someone new, someone I'd been with for almost 7 years. But then, the calls began again. This time, she claimed she was pregnant. I asked her for proof, which she couldn't provide, saying she had lost the baby. I warned my current girlfriend that my ex might try to show up at my house, and she suggested I stay at her place for safety. One day I returned home to find my yard covered in snow and full of footprints, with an empty bottle left behind. There was a bag on my doorstep with a 15-page letter inside saying she was leaving her son to me because she believed she wouldn't be there for him. I didn't read the entire letter. Instead, I called the police and told them what I found, including her personal documents left with the bottle. The police informed me they had already found her and would send officers to collect her belongings. My neighbor then told me he had heard sounds in my yard that morning and saw her hiding under my deck, suffering from frostbite and hypothermia. He had called for help. I realized I would never have thought to look there, and if she had died, her body might have remained hidden until spring. Her car was found a few blocks from my house. I informed her father about its location. That's when her parents apologized and admitted they had hoped she would improve with me around. They revealed it was actually her, not her ex, who had been violent in the past. They also doubted she had been pregnant, describing their daughter as very deceitful. It was a difficult period in my life, but I haven't heard from her since then. I hope she and her son are doing better now. I have great respect for her parents. But for both of our sakes, I hope we never contact each other again. The story began around 5 years back when I found myself talking to a man at the local fitness center. Going to the fitness center was never about finding love for me. Yet, being single, the thought of meeting someone was always at the back of my mind. There was this one man who often tried to strike up a conversation. I didn't always feel like talking, but he was different from others who hit on women at the gym. He actually listened and didn't act like he knew everything about working out. His name was Mike, a tall and well-built man with an impressive physique. One evening, I stumbled upon Mike on a dating app, and we matched. We exchanged a few messages, but then I stopped replying for some reason. A couple of days later, we bumped into each other at the fitness center. He walked over, started a chat, and then asked me out. I didn't really want to go, but ended up accepting his invitation because he asked in person, and it felt awkward to say no given we both frequented the same gym. So we went out for dinner the following night. Surprisingly, Mike was quite charming outside the gym, dressed nicely, and managed to make me laugh. We seemed to click. However, I soon noticed a worrying sign. Mike was openly rude to our server. "Waiters? They're just people failing to do better," he remarked. I found it off-putting but tried to overlook it. After dating for about a month, Mike and I decided to make our relationship official. But soon, things took a turn for the worse. He would show up at my place unexpectedly late at night, lose his temper if I missed his calls, and had a tendency to get really angry. If I didn't answer his call, he would insult me, talk down about my friends, and make me feel small. One night, he arrived at my apartment drunk, insisting we be intimate. I refused and asked him to leave. However, half an hour later, he was outside my window, pleading. "Open up. I need to be close to you. It's killing me not to be with you," he said. I told him to leave. He then threatened to force his way in. Yeah, he threatened me with violence. That's when I threatened to call the police, and he finally left. I messaged him saying it was over between us. That was the final straw for me. I couldn't stand being with him any longer. Hours later, he was back, banging on my door, begging for forgiveness. "Please, I'll change. I love you, and I'll start therapy," he cried. I made the mistake of suggesting we could reconsider our relationship if he sought help. I should have ended things sooner. For a while, we weren't really together, but still saw each other occasionally. He behaved for a week until his next outburst. I was having a rough day and wasn't feeling sociable. My interest in Mike had vanished, yet I was also frightened for my safety. I decided to hit the gym to try and shake off some stress, finding myself chatting with an older gentleman there. He was nice, talking to me like a friend, but we had barely spoken for 3 minutes when I heard something that stopped me cold. "There you are, ignoring me for him. You're nothing but a cheat. Why aren't you answering your phone?" I felt my face burn with shame as he made a big scene right there in the gym. He started throwing things around, and it scared me so much. I ran out, tears streaming down my face, got into my car, and drove off as fast as I could. I left my gym bag and water bottle behind, but I didn't care. I just needed to escape from him. He followed me out, yelling and pounding on my car windows. I could barely hear his angry words through the glass. I drove away quickly, and then my phone buzzed. "I'll make you regret this. If not today, then someday." I blocked his number right away and drove home shaking. But it didn't end there. A few nights later, he was outside my house again. This time, he played So Sick by Neo on his car stereo, loudly crying and shouting about hurting himself. I called the police and told him to leave me alone. I never thought I'd need a restraining order, especially with my busy schedule as a bartender. It seemed like too much trouble. The police took an hour to arrive after he had gone, and they didn't offer much help. They just told me to call again if he showed up. Months passed, and he kept trying to reach out, making new social media accounts just to send me messages. I blocked him everywhere, and even switched gyms. For nearly 2 years, he tried to contact me through various platforms, sending messages and even using LinkedIn. But the most chilling thing happened when he sent me an email. It contained a photo of a tattoo, a teddy bear with a gun to its head and the words "Jeer Bear" written above. That was a silly nickname I once called him. The email had just one line: "Feeling sad." The thought that he would go to such lengths over a relationship that lasted only 2 months was deeply unsettling. Let this be a warning. Be very careful about who you let into your life. Many years ago, I bumped into a girl I once knew from high school named Emma. We weren't close friends or anything. We hung out in different circles. But I recall she invited me over for a party at her place once. Nothing much happened after that party, though I did meet my high school sweetheart, Lisa, there. It had been a few years since we all graduated, and I ran into her on a street one day. We talked for a bit, and somehow, I found myself at her apartment that evening. After sharing a couple of glasses of wine, things led to us being together in the makeshift bed she had set up in her living room. It was an ordinary encounter, nothing special. But soon after, Emma left the bed and walked towards the kitchen, which was all the way across the living room. I was still lying in bed, feeling a bit dazed, when she turned on the kitchen light. That's when things started to get strange. Firstly, the light in the kitchen seemed really old, flickering on with a loud noise, almost like a growl. The light it gave off was harsh, almost blinding, making everything it touched look pale and washed out. The rest of the living room remained in shadows, but the doorway to the kitchen was lit up in this eerie, unnatural way, and the buzzing sound from the light was unsettling. This weirdness snapped me back to alertness, and I got this sinking feeling that something was off. Initially, I thought I heard quiet voices from the kitchen. I wasn't sure if Emma had a roommate, but feeling exposed, I quickly grabbed my clothes. As time ticked by, with no sign of Emma or any typical noises like footsteps or her coming back to check on me, I started to think she might be on her phone. But then, the quiet talking turned into what sounded like a heated argument. This made me feel really uneasy. So I quietly dressed up and sat on the edge of the bed, straining to hear better, trying to understand what was happening. The idea that she might be on the phone vanished when I could swear I heard two angry voices clashing. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of dread, and the once familiar setting now seemed alien and menacing. The shadows seemed to dance mockingly, and the unsettling glow from the kitchen doorway painted everything in a spectral light. As the argument in the kitchen grew louder, I felt a chill crawl up my spine, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I was about to call out to Emma when suddenly... The problem was, both voices sounded exactly like Emma's. My mind raced towards the idea of escaping through the front door. The situation in the kitchen escalated quickly when I heard the sound of drawers being yanked open, followed by the chilling clang of metal. My heart pounded as I frantically looked around the dimly lit living room for anything I could use to defend myself. Then suddenly, everything went silent. The light in the kitchen flickered off with one last moan, plunging the room into darkness. I heard footsteps approaching from the kitchen, crossing the living room towards me. I was rooted to the spot in fear. Emma appeared before me with a smile, her hands empty. Despite seeing no weapon, I was terrified. Her voice was suddenly soft and sweet again. She asked, "Do you really have to leave now?" I lied, saying I got dressed because I thought she was busy with something. I didn't know what else to say. I quickly left her place, vowing never to return. Months later, I bumped into another classmate, Jane. Out of curiosity, I mentioned my encounter with Emma. Jane responded, "Poor Emma. Did you know she was let go from a facility not long ago?" Confused, I asked, "What do you mean?" Jane explained after high school she had a total breakdown and was put in a psychiatric hospital. I tried to play it down, saying Emma and I were just acquaintances from a party long ago. Jane then dropped another bombshell. "That party? Emma had been planning it for months, hoping to get close to you. But then, Lisa caught your eye first." Relieved I was now living far away and married, I thought to myself, no more high school reunions for me. I learned Emma eventually got her life together, going back to school and landing a professional job. That's great for her, but reunions? Still a hard pass. The eerie encounter and the revelations that followed ensured I stayed far away from any reminders of that night and Emma's unsettling behavior. Dating has always been a bit of a nightmare for me. When I finally came out as gay, I was hoping things would turn around. But it wasn't that simple. The dating pool? Much smaller than I expected. 9 times out of 10, when I got interested in someone, she wasn't even into women. It got frustrating. So I decided it was time for some help to figure out who was actually on the same page. That's when I signed up for an app called Luna, a place where women who liked other women could connect. After I set up my profile, I was surprised by how many women were actually out there, and I just hadn't come across them before. It was a relief, to be honest. My biggest issue had always been finding women who were into women, and suddenly that roadblock was out of the way. Feeling more confident than I had in ages, I jumped into chatting. I started talking to a few girls, but there was one in particular who caught my attention. She lived just 2 towns over from me. The fact that she was so close made me a little giddy. I'd be lying if I said I didn't start imagining all sorts of things between us. Can you tell I was crushing pretty hard? She had this playful attitude that hooked me right away. Plus, her photos were exactly my type. So when I finally worked up the nerve to suggest we meet in person for dinner, I was beyond excited when she agreed. I showed up at the diner a bit early, like 10 minutes or so. It was in her town, not mine, so I gave myself extra time in case I got lost. I had spent way too long getting ready, but at least I wasn't late. The place wasn't anything fancy, no reservation needed, so I just walked in, grabbed a table, and waited. And by waited, I mean I nervously messed with my hair every 2 minutes, paranoid that I was wrecking it. After about the 5th time fixing it in the mirror, I realized she was running late. I glanced around, thinking maybe she'd walked in and was just having trouble spotting me. But besides a family near the entrance and some creepy guy in the back booth who kept glancing over at me, there was no sign of her. I figured she was just running late. No big deal, right? A few more minutes passed, so I shot her a quick text to check in. It showed as read almost instantly, but there was no reply. That's when the sinking feeling started. Did she bail? Did I really get stood up? After all the time I spent getting ready, worrying about how this date would go, now I'm just sitting here alone, with the creep in the corner still eyeing me between checking his phone. I felt stupid, embarrassed, and more than a little frustrated. Trying not to freak out, I told myself maybe she was driving and just couldn't text back. So I decided to call her, just to make sure everything was okay. But the second I hit dial, I heard a ringtone. Not from my phone, but from somewhere close. My stomach dropped as the guy in the corner frantically silenced his phone. Right after that, my screen flashed. Call declined. The dude locked eyes with me, and my gut screamed that something was seriously wrong. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my stuff, heart racing, and made a beeline for the door. As I stepped outside, I glanced over my shoulder and saw him following, jogging toward me, calling my name. How did he know my name? Nope, absolutely not. I practically sprinted to my car, fumbling with my keys as I unlocked the door and jumped in. He was just a few feet away, still calling after me. I slammed the door, threw the car in drive, and got out of there as fast as I could, watching him fade into the distance in my rearview mirror. When I got home, I tossed my bag onto the table and collapsed onto my bed, tears welling up. I felt so stupid. How did I not see that coming? I almost deleted the app right then and there. But for some reason, I didn't. I decided to give it one more shot. And believe it or not, that's how I ended up meeting my current girlfriend. So yeah, dating apps can be terrifying, but sometimes they lead you to the right person. Just always, always, stay cautious. This happened a couple of summers ago when I was 22. I was staying with my parents for the break before my final year of university. I was pretty bored, so I downloaded a dating app, and after a bit of swiping, I matched with a girl named Rachel. I'm not sure which app it was, maybe Tinder or something. But we chatted for a while and eventually I got her Snapchat. I preferred talking there anyway, so we started snapping each other. Rachel seemed chill, but there was something a little off about her replies. She'd say things that didn't quite make sense, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly felt strange. Maybe it was just her sense of humor. Either way, I kept talking to her out of curiosity. It's not like I had anything better to do. We didn't talk constantly, just exchanged snaps here and there, mostly random selfies. After 2 days, we were snapping casually but hadn't made any plans to meet up. It wasn't serious, just something to pass the time. That night, I hung out with my buddy Matt. We grabbed some takeout and went back to his place, which was about 10 minutes from mine. I got home around 11 p.m., snapped a few people, including Rachel, and then went to bed. A few hours later, I woke up feeling really out of it. I reached for my phone and saw it was nearly 3 a.m. That's when I noticed something weird out of the corner of my eye. I turned towards the window, and there was someone standing outside, watching me. My heart jumped into my throat and I stumbled back, freaking out. After squinting through the darkness, I realized it looked like Rachel, the girl I'd been snapping for the past few days. My head spun with confusion. How could she be here? I thought maybe I was still half asleep, but the panic in my chest told me I was fully awake. She didn't move. She just stood there, staring at me through the glass. It was too dark to make out her face clearly, but I could tell it was her. In a daze, I grabbed my phone. I wasn't sure what else to do, so I opened Snapchat, figuring I'd message her to get away from my window. When I clicked on her profile, I saw something that made my stomach twist. Her Bitmoji was right next to mine on the Snap map. That's when it hit me. She'd been tracking my location through the app. I quickly sent her a snap. "Why are you outside my window? This is creepy." I watched as the message went through, and just to cover my back, I took a screenshot of her location next to mine. A few seconds after I sent the message, I saw her figure move away from the window, disappearing into the shadows. For a minute or two, nothing happened. Then, I saw that she'd opened the message, but she didn't reply. She left it on, read. I got up and peered out the window, scanning the yard for any sign of her, but she was gone. Not wanting to take any chances, I left my room and looked through other windows in the house, hoping to catch a glimpse of where she might have gone. But she had vanished. After a few minutes of searching, I went back to my room, feeling unsettled. I checked Snapchat again, and that's when I noticed I was blocked. Just like that, she was gone from my life. No explanation, no follow-up. She had also disappeared from the dating app as if she was never there. I couldn't shake how bizarre the whole thing was. What did she want? Why was she outside my window, watching me like that? I still have the screenshot saved on my phone, and every time I see it, I'm reminded of how terrifying that night was. This all happened about 4 summers ago, though the details are still pretty clear in my head. For context, I've been on more than my fair share of bad dates and found myself in some pretty dumb spots before. Back then, I was a 26-year-old woman, figuring things out. It kicked off with a match on the Bumble app. He had that geeky vibe that I liked. Glasses, messy hair, the whole deal. His profile was full of photos of him hiking and exploring places, giving off a thrill-seeker energy. I was intrigued. After noticing I'd checked out his profile, he sent me a message. We flirted a bit, and numbers were exchanged, even though he lived around 45 minutes away. He mentioned he wasn't planning to come to my town anytime soon, so meeting wasn't likely. I appreciated the honesty. At least he wasn't wasting my time. Then, a few days later, I got a text from him out of nowhere. He said he was in my town for work and asked if I wanted to join him at a bar. Since I happened to be nearby, I agreed. The weird part was, he offered to pick me up. Looking back, I know it wasn't the best idea, but I said yes, even though the bar was just a 5-minute walk from where I was. When he finally showed up, way later than expected, something felt off. It turned out he wasn't even at the bar like he said. When I got into his car, a rental, I realized he was a terrible driver. It felt like he had just learned to drive the day before. We circled around aimlessly until he asked me to choose a place to go, but he didn't want to stay in the area because parking was too hard. I picked a spot about 20 minutes away, a busy place with lots of parking, thinking it would be safer to be in a crowded area with a stranger. Once we got there, he started pushing me to drink more than I was comfortable with. I'm not a heavy drinker, and I made that clear, but he kept insisting. "Come on, it's just a pub, nothing serious," he kept saying. Reluctantly, I gave in and had one drink, but he immediately pressured me to have another. His persistence was irritating, but somehow, his charm kept me from leaving right away. At one point, I spotted a familiar face, an old classmate from years back. I made sure to wave and make it obvious that I knew someone there. In my head, it was my way of letting him know that he wasn't the only person aware of my whereabouts. Normally, I'm not paranoid, but something in the back of my mind was telling me to stay alert. After what felt like hours of awkward conversation and forced laughs, I finally told him I was ready to leave. Instead of taking me back, he suggested we cross the street to grab coffee. At that moment, something just felt off. Neither of us had drunk much, so it wasn't like we needed to sober up. Coffee seemed like a weird suggestion, but I went with it. We sat there sipping our cups while he rambled on about this amazing Airbnb he had rented nearby. It was in a quiet part of town, a bit farther from the city. He kept talking about how it was super cozy, and he had the whole place to himself. Then, of course, came the invitation for me to come check it out. I kept politely saying no, tossing out different reasons why I couldn't go. Every time I did, he found some excuse to counter me. It was getting exhausting, so I eventually agreed. Only on the condition that he'd drive me back home first to grab some stuff. I didn't want to go at all, but I had this gut feeling he wasn't going to let me off easily. He seemed happy with my answer, so we left. As we were driving towards my place, though, he suddenly changed plans. Instead of taking me home, he suggested stopping by a convenience store to grab me some travel toiletries, so I wouldn't need to pick up anything from my apartment. That's when I really started to panic. My whole plan was to get away from him, and now it felt like he was trying to trap me. Something about him just felt wrong, and I was kicking myself for getting back into the car in the first place. He started driving towards a rural area, miles away from any store. Definitely no 7-Elevens out there. I mentioned, trying to stay calm, that I'd changed my mind and just wanted to go home. That's when he said something that made my blood run cold. He casually mentioned that the Airbnb wasn't just his. He was actually sharing it with the owners. He said they were really nice and fun, and that they liked to drink and play games. My stomach dropped because earlier, he had clearly told me he had the whole place to himself. I knew right then I couldn't let on that I'd caught his lie. So I played along, acting all excited, and said something like, "Oh, I'll need to change into my cute fluffy pajamas. No way I'm staying in this dress all night." I threw in some stuff about needing my meds, saying I absolutely couldn't miss a dose. Somehow, that convinced him, and he turned the car around. As we got closer to the city, I felt a little better, but still on edge. At that point, I just wanted out of the situation as fast as possible. When we were almost at my place, I realized there was no way I could let him know where I lived. He was already hinting that he'd come inside once we got there, and there was no chance in hell I was letting that happen. I was scanning for any way to escape, knowing that if he really wanted to, he could easily drive me somewhere secluded in just a few minutes. We pulled up to a stop sign, and by some stroke of luck, there were people crossing the street. That was my moment. I quickly opened the door and calmly said, "You know, I'm not feeling great. I'll text you later." Without waiting for a reply, I got out of the car and headed straight through a nearby park. There was a path that cars couldn't access, so I took it, not daring to look back until I was out of sight. When I finally glanced over my shoulder, I saw him in the car, staring at me with the most furious expression I've ever seen. Even now, the thought of it gives me chills. An hour later, I found that he had blocked me on Bumble. Looking back, I think he suggested the coffee so he could spike my drink or something. He probably told me up front we'd never meet just to cover his tracks. I'm sure he had no good intentions that night. Since then, I've been way more cautious about dating. I actually met my fiancée through Bumble, but I was a lot more careful the next time around, always meeting in public and making sure I had my own way to leave. My name's Alice, and I've always found it easier to connect with people online than face-to-face. But that hasn't stopped me from running into a few nightmare situations. This one, though, still freaks me out to this day. I was about 20 at the time. I had gone on a date with a guy I met on an app. I'll just call him D. It started out pretty normal, or so I thought. We took a walk around town just talking while the sun set. I'm the type who's always out and about, so I didn't mind walking. But his conversation kept getting strange. He would steer the topics in weird directions, ignoring whatever I had to say. Still, I tried to shrug it off. Eventually, he suggested we go back to his place for pizza and a movie. At first, I didn't think it was too odd. I agreed, but it wasn't until a few minutes later that I realized we were already halfway to his apartment. I didn't even notice he had been leading me there the whole time. We got to his place, and as the movie started, he kept trying to cuddle and kiss me. I wasn't feeling it, so I tried to make space between us, which only annoyed him. I ended up sitting on the floor as far from the couch as I could get. He got pissed. Started throwing passive-aggressive comments my way, like I had done something wrong. What made it worse? He never ordered the pizza. I was starving by that point, but then, out of nowhere, I felt this sharp pain in my stomach. It hit hard. I excused myself to the bathroom and realized I was bleeding, a lot. Something was really wrong. When I came out and told him I needed to leave, he snapped, getting angrier than ever before. I tried to grab my shoes, but he snatched them out of my hands, along with my bag. Before I could react, he shoved me into his bedroom and onto the bed. He muttered something about how I should just sleep and drop my stuff right next to him. Then, without a word, he turned his back to me and laid down. I was stuck there for what seemed like hours, listening to his breathing get deeper until he started snoring. That's when I knew he was out cold. I moved as quietly as I could, sliding off the bed and onto the floor. I crawled across the room, inching closer to my shoes and purse. Once I had them, I crawled toward the door, praying it wouldn't creak when I opened it. I slipped on my shoes, unlocked the door, and managed to get out without making a sound. As soon as the door closed behind me, I sprinted down the stairs and into the street. I kept running, heart pounding, not stopping until I finally made it home. I barely had time to deal with what was happening to me physically, rushing to change clothes and handle the medical emergency I was going through. I collapsed in the bathroom, overwhelmed. My roommate, who had been sleeping, eventually found me crying in the tub, still trying to process everything that had happened. It's an experience I wouldn't wish on anyone. Please, be careful out there. This happened a few years ago when I was still using dating apps. I wasn't one to swipe right on just anyone, but there was this one guy, let's call him Brian, who caught my eye. He looked decent, close to my age, and his bio mentioned he was into startups and always hustling with new business ideas. I guess I was attracted to that entrepreneurial vibe, so I swiped right. To my surprise, he matched with me too, and things kicked off from there. We exchanged a few messages. I told him about how I was studying to become a nurse and attending night school, while he gave me vague details about his life. I did ask about his ventures, curious about what he actually did, but he always found a way to dodge those questions. I figured maybe he didn't want to come off as bragging or thought I was just in it for his money. Yeah, in hindsight, I should have thought it was shadier, but I let it slide. Eventually, we decided to meet up for dinner. Brian suggested this local steakhouse he apparently loved, raving about their prime rib. I'll admit, that made me more excited about the date. I mean, steakhouse for a first date? That's pretty fancy, right? I spent a little more time than usual getting ready, making sure I looked good. After all, first impressions matter. When I got to the restaurant, I waited in the lobby for him. That's when things started feeling off. When Brian finally walked in, he looked nothing like his photos. He'd gained a lot of weight, his hair was long and greasy, and his beard was a mess. His clothes were loose and stained, like he'd just rolled out of bed. I was shocked but tried not to be shallow. Maybe he'd had a rough week or something. We sat down, and when the waiter came to take our drink orders, Brian immediately asked for 2 baskets of bread. Not 1, but 2. He insisted we needed them. When they arrived, he dove into the bread like he hadn't eaten in days, tearing it apart with his hands. By the time our actual meals came, I was already feeling uneasy. True to his word, he ordered the prime rib. I went with the chicken Alfredo, figuring it was a safe choice. While we waited for the food, I tried making conversation, hoping to understand Brian a bit better. So, I asked him again about his business ventures, curious about what he was working on. He laughed, shrugged, and told me not to worry about it. Another red flag, but I brushed it off. Then, out of nowhere, he shifted the conversation to nursing school and asked how much it was costing me. I thought it was an odd question, but I answered anyway, telling him how much I was paying to get my license. That's when things took a bizarre turn. He suggested I drop out of nursing school and invest every cent I had into Bitcoin. Now, I know Bitcoin is a hot topic today, but this was in early 2016, when it was already skyrocketing. This guy was telling me to abandon my future in nursing and throw all my savings into it when it was at its peak. It was sitting at about $12,000 back then. Had I listened to him, I would have lost everything when it crashed just a couple of months later. He bragged about how he'd dumped all his life savings into it just the week before, and how he was convinced he'd be rich soon. At that moment, everything started to click. Brian wasn't just weird, he was broke. He had put everything into Bitcoin and was probably using dating apps to find women he could convince to do the same, maybe even score a free dinner in the process. My suspicions were confirmed when the bill came, and he forgot his wallet. He casually asked if I could cover it, claiming he'd get the next one. Right. When the waiter brought the check, Brian asked for 2 to-go boxes and another basket of bread. He stuffed his leftovers into one box, then filled the other with my leftovers and every last piece of bread. I almost felt sorry for the guy. Almost. But then I remembered he had ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, a $30 steak, while I'd gone with a $12 plate of pasta. At the end of the night, I paid for the meal, but there was no way I was seeing him again. The whole experience left a bad taste in my mouth. Moral of the story: do your homework before going on a date, and don't let yourself get used as a free meal by someone who doesn't know how to manage their money. And yeah, Bitcoin's doing well now, but back then? Brian's investment timing was terrible, and I doubt things worked out for him. Safe to say, there was no second date. Back in 2013, I made a dumb choice that still haunts me. I was 19 and just starting to mess around with dating apps. I don't remember which one it was, but I matched with this guy named Kyle. He had this laid-back vibe, seemed tall and muscular, with dirty blonde hair. We hit it off quickly, just chatting about random things. After a day or so of texting, he asked if I wanted to hang out. Looking back, I should have said no, but I was bored, restless, and kind of curious. He invited me to his place, and that's when a little voice in my head told me this might be a mistake. I knew it was safer to meet someone in public first. But for some reason, I ignored that voice. We hadn't exchanged many pictures, and we hadn't even talked on the phone. But I figured, what's the worst that could happen? I agreed, and he sent me his address. He said we could just chill, maybe watch a movie or grab some food. It sounded low-key, and I was only planning to stay for an hour or two anyway. It was around 8 p.m. when I finally got ready and plugged his address into my GPS. The place was about 15 minutes away, on the other side of the town. I drove through a few dark streets until I reached a dead end that led me into a small, dingy motel. My stomach dropped. Why had he given me the address of this sketchy place instead of a regular house? I should have turned the car around right then. But for some reason, I didn't. I parked in one of the few empty spots, staring up at the rundown building. There were maybe 10 rooms on each floor, with flickering lights illuminating the balconies. A few cars sat in the lot, but it was mostly deserted. Some windows had curtains drawn tight, while others were dark and empty. I sat in my car for a minute, my heart pounding as I pulled out my phone to text Kyle. I messaged Kyle. "You didn't mention we'd be meeting at a motel." He responded pretty fast, saying he didn't want to scare me off, but he really wanted to see me. He claimed he was only staying there for a couple of days, waiting to move into a new apartment. Apparently all his stuff was in a nearby storage unit, and his last lease ended sooner than he expected. It was a long string of excuses, but I got the gist. He was between places and just needed somewhere cheap to crash. As sketchy as it all sounded, I decided to believe him. He'd been so chill until now, so I thought, why not give him the benefit of the doubt? Dumb, I know. I told him the motel seemed a little shady, and I wasn't too sure about going in. He said he understood, but this was the best he could do with the rent and deposit situation for his new place. Then, he asked me to come in, telling me his room number. It was one of the few rooms with a light on, ground floor, just a bit to my left. I sat there for a minute, staring at the door, feeling uneasy. I tried convincing myself I was overreacting. It's normal to feel weird about an old, run-down motel, right? I didn't text him back, but after a couple more minutes of sitting in my car, I decided to go in. His story seemed legit enough. As I opened my car door and started walking towards the room, something caught my attention from one of the windows. I glanced over and saw a guy peeking out from behind the curtain in Kyle's room. But it wasn't Kyle. It didn't look anything like the guy in his profile picture. As soon as I noticed him, he ducked out of sight and yanked the curtain closed. It was so quick, but I was sure that wasn't Kyle. The dude didn't even have the same hair color. I froze, feeling a wave of dread wash over me. Was someone else in the room with him? I pulled out my phone and texted him, "Who's with you in the room?" His reply came almost instantly. "No one. I'm here alone." My gut screamed at me to leave, so I turned around and hurried back to my car. I texted him again, telling him I'd seen someone in the window, and his reply was something like, "No, you didn't. Come on in already." That sealed the deal for me. I was out of there. I jumped in my car, slammed the door, and drove away without looking back. As soon as I got home, I blocked him. The whole drive back, my heart was racing. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I'd come to making a huge mistake. I still don't know if it was a catfish situation or if he had someone else in the room, but either way, it was the creepiest experience I've ever had with a dating app. Looking back, I was lucky. So freaking lucky I didn't walk into that room. I hadn't really thought about this for a long time, until a recent chat with a friend brought it back. I'm pushing 40 now, so this must have happened when I was around 18 or 20. I briefly dated a guy I met while working at a strip mall. He used to come by the shop all the time, flirting with me whenever I was on shift. I was super shy and clueless back then, not used to that kind of attention. Looking back now, it's clear he picked up on my low confidence and awkwardness. That kind of makes you an easy target, you know? He was a bit older than me, probably in his late 20s, but I didn't think much of it at the time. We had our first little date during one of my breaks at the food court. Everything seemed normal until he started asking me to come over to his place after work. That should have been my first warning sign, but I was young and didn't see it. After a few weeks of chatting on the phone and more food court breaks together, I finally agreed to hang out at his place. His apartment wasn't far, maybe a 15-minute drive from where I lived, so I thought it would be fine. As I headed there, I felt this weird knot in my stomach, but I brushed it off as nerves. I hadn't dated much, so I figured I was just overthinking. When I got to his apartment, we sat in his living room watching TV for a bit. He then lit up a joint. Now I smoked a bit back then, but nothing heavy. I definitely smoke way more now than I ever did back then. Thanks to adulting, I guess. Anyway, he passed the joint to me and I only took a couple of hits. Almost right away, I realized something was wrong. I got way higher than I should have for just a few puffs. Something wasn't right. I noticed something odd. He wasn't really smoking when I passed the joint back to him. He'd act like he was taking a hit, but then hand it back, saying I needed to relight it. For some reason, I couldn't keep it burning, and it was getting on my nerves. So, I just set it aside and tried to focus on relaxing. But my head was spinning, and I felt like I was losing control of my body. He casually suggested I finish smoking and lie down for a bit. At that point, all I wanted was to leave. When I tried to stand, I could barely get up. He noticed and got up, pretending to help me. But instead, he kept pushing me deeper into the couch. That's when the fear really hit. I realized this wasn't just a bad vibe. Things were about to go downhill fast. I'm not exactly small, but I felt powerless as he started trying to pull my clothes off. His hand was around my neck, and he began forcing himself on me, kissing my neck aggressively. I panicked, managing to roll off the couch, and he toppled with me. We fought on the floor, but I somehow scrambled to my feet and bolted toward the door. He was right behind me. By some miracle, as I stumbled outside, I saw a cop car at the stop sign a little down the road. As soon as he spotted it, he stopped chasing me and darted back into the house. I tried waving at the police, but they didn't notice me and just drove off. It felt like a cruel joke. They were always around this neighborhood, but no one thought they ever actually did anything useful. Looking back, though, I think their presence might have saved me from something worse that day. Shaking, I dropped my keys, but I finally managed to get into my car. I drove away at a snail's pace, barely seeing straight. My vision was doubling, and I felt like I was hallucinating. Somehow, I made it home, even though I couldn't have been going faster than 5 miles per hour. Once I parked, I just sat there for what seemed like forever, trying to decide if I should call an ambulance and admit what I'd smoked. It was obvious that the blunt had something stronger than weed in it. I felt awful. My heart was racing, and my head felt like it was splitting open. In a panic, I called my friend, and her response was so casual it annoyed me. She told me to just sleep it off, saying it was probably laced with angel dust or some type of crack. Yeah, we're not friends anymore for many reasons, but that's a different story altogether. Anyway, I finally got home and crashed. When I woke up the next day, I didn't have a regular hangover, but I felt drained, like my body had run a marathon. I spent the day resting and thinking about the whole thing. I was a teenager who basically walked into a stranger's house, got drugged, and almost assaulted. It scared me to the point that I didn't trust anyone new for a long time. Dating? Forget it. I also swore off smoking unless I personally watched the joint get rolled by someone I trusted, usually within my close friend group. I ran into that guy a couple of times after the incident. He'd show up at my job and just smirk at me. It was terrifying, and it triggered full-blown panic attacks. I quit that job soon after, and even though I regret not calling the cops, part of me still wonders if it would have made any difference. Who knows how many other girls he pulled that on. To this day, I've never figured out exactly what the blunt was laced with, but I did learn a valuable lesson. If you ever have trouble keeping a joint or blunt lit, take it as a warning. There's probably more than weed in there. And honestly, after going through something like this, the biggest takeaway should be to only smoke with people you trust completely. If you're in charge of rolling, take a good look at the weed first. If it feels awkward, just make up something like, "I want to check out the strain." Yeah, it sounds a bit nerdy, but everyone loves the person who knows their stuff, right? Bottom line, not everyone who's interested in you has good intentions. Some people can be persistent and charming, but that doesn't mean they're safe. I learned the hard way that you've got to be careful, even when you think you're just making small mistakes. That doesn't excuse what people like him do, though. Stay safe out there, everyone. This happened a few years back when I was still single, working late shifts at a fast food joint we'll call Taco Bell. It was one of those slow nights where the clock drags and all the tasks are done. I was just killing time, hanging out by the drive-thru window, scrolling through dating apps. That's when I stumbled across a girl's profile who seemed kind of interesting. She was a year older than me, had a goofy intro, and apparently loved koalas. Weird, right? I couldn't resist, so I opened with, "Why koalas?" She hit me back with a laughing emoji, saying they were cute but dumb, just like her. I appreciated the self-deprecating humor. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. She asked what I did, and I casually told her I was juggling college classes during the day and working at Taco Bell in the evenings. Not a big deal. There were tons of Taco Bells in town, so I wasn't worried about being specific. After a while, she said she had to run some errands, but suggested we meet up after my shift. I was stoked at first, but quickly remembered I had been sweating it out in a Taco Bell kitchen for hours. Plus, I had an early class the next morning. I told her Friday night would be better since I had the evening off, and she agreed. As my shift dragged towards the end, a car rolled into the drive-thru. I gave my usual line, "Welcome to Taco Bell, what can I get you tonight?" A voice responded, "Hi, I'm looking for Tyler," which was my name. I froze, completely confused. Why was someone asking for me at the drive-thru? I hesitated before saying, Yeah, I'm Tyler. Can I help you?" There was a pause before the person said, "Finally." Then, the car pulled up to the window, and to my shock, it was the girl I had matched with earlier. I stood there, awkwardly staring at her, trying to process what was happening. Hey, how's it going?" That's about all I could manage. My mind was scrambling. She responded with this creepy smile plastered across her face, saying, "I'm doing great now! This is the 4th Taco Bell I've been to trying to find you." The way she said it sent chills down my spine. Her smile wasn't normal. It was like she had just unlocked a prize she had been hunting for a while. It was unsettling. She quickly followed with, "So, ready to go grab those drinks now?" I stood there, blinking in disbelief. Like, what? I was still in my uniform, still working. I hadn't even clocked out yet. She had been driving around town, hitting up different Taco Bells just to track me down. I tried to respond, but my brain couldn't form words. I glanced down at my Taco Bell uniform, hoping she'd get the hint. You can see I'm still working, right?" But she didn't blink, didn't even move. She just stood there, smiling that unnerving smile, her eyes locked on me. The whole thing felt like a scene from a bad horror movie, the kind where the killer is hiding right in plain sight. Finally, after what felt like forever, my manager came over, probably noticing how tense things had gotten. He gave me a pat on the shoulder, signaling me to step aside, which I gladly did. He took my place at the window and asked her what she needed. She started rambling about how she had been searching all night to find me. My manager wasn't having it. He told her, politely at first, to order something or leave. But she wasn't ready to go without a fight. She started yelling at him, her voice rising and getting more aggressive. It took a few minutes of back and forth before she finally sped off, screeching out of the parking lot. After she was gone, my manager turned to me and said he could tell from across the restaurant that something was seriously off and thought he'd better step in. I thanked him, still shaken by the whole thing. I told him she was absolutely crazy, and he just nodded in agreement. Once I got home, I opened Tinder, half expecting some weird message from her. But instead, I found out she had blocked me. I guess she figured out I wasn't interested. That was the strangest experience I ever had with Tinder, and thankfully, I never heard from her again. I've been dipping my toes into the world of online dating for around 6 or maybe 7 years now. Don't feel too bad for me, though. It wasn't exactly constant. I'd go on a few dates that seemed promising, but something would always come up, or we'd just not vibe at all. So, I'd stop, delete my profiles, and swear off the apps for a while. Then, a few months later, I'd start again. Sadly, the same thing would keep happening. Still, I wasn't quite ready to throw in the towel yet. I wanted to find someone who I could see myself being with for the long haul. So, I cleaned up my act, and yet again, I polished my profiles, ready to give it another shot. This was sometime in early 2023. I guess I was feeling more sure of myself and more positive about how things were going in the world. I had taken a break from mid-2021 to the start of 2022 for, well, obvious reasons. Things started moving again. I matched with a few people, though most of those fizzled out after just a few messages. Some dates did happen, though nothing major. Then there was her, Rachel. She was the one who really stood out to me, and I felt like I had hit the jackpot when she agreed to go out with me. Rachel had this long, wavy dark hair, falling just past her shoulders, with a kind of chestnut hue. Her eyes were a striking gray that seemed almost silver, which contrasted nicely with the light smattering of freckles on her cheeks. But it wasn't just her looks. It was the way she laughed and smiled. Something about her laugh got to me. It wasn't forced, like she just couldn't help herself. Her dating profile had some silly joke on it, and I nailed the answer in my first message. So, we were off to a good start since she clearly didn't take things too seriously. We chatted for a bit, even did a few video calls, and eventually decided to meet up. Our first date? It went really well. We had dinner, then wandered around a local park, and finished up with coffee at a small cafe. I usually start feeling uneasy at this point, thinking about the what-ifs, because usually, by now, I'd get that text saying it wasn't going to work out, but not this time. To my surprise, Rachel wanted to see me again, so we did. The second time, we went to a movie and played some games at a small arcade nearby. It was fun, more relaxed, and we clicked even more. We found out we shared a love for the same kind of music, and that's when she asked me if I'd want to go to a concert with her, one for a band we both liked. Of course, I jumped at the chance and even offered to pay for the tickets. She refused, saying she had already gotten them. Now, to be honest, I hadn't ever gotten this far with someone. Usually, things fell apart way before this point, and I didn't really know what to expect next. But all of this? It happened in just a few weeks. I decided to dress a little more casually than usual, a band t-shirt and some old jeans. When I picked Rachel up, she was wearing something similar, but she somehow made it look so much better. We agreed to grab a few slices at this small pizza joint about 30 minutes away from the concert venue. Everything was going great. We were laughing, talking about the bands, and really enjoying each other's company when she got a text. I saw her expression drop as she read it, and I could already tell it wasn't good news. There had been some electrical fire at the venue, and the show was canceled until further notice. We were both bummed out since we had been really looking forward to it, but I tried to keep the mood light by suggesting we still head out to the area, maybe see if we could spot any of the band members hanging out nearby. Rachel, however, had a different idea. She suggested we just head back to my place instead. I was taken aback. I never would have made that suggestion myself, not wanting to come off the wrong way, but she was pretty insistent. She said we shouldn't let the night go to waste. So, after we finished our pizza, we grabbed a cheap bottle of wine from a nearby liquor store, her pick, and then we drove back to my apartment. Once there, I tried to keep the vibe fun. I put on some music from the band we were supposed to see, even found an old live performance on YouTube. I guess I was trying to be playful or something. We ended up talking for a while, sharing stories, and before long, things got pretty heated, and we ended the night in the bedroom. It was amazing, and since neither of us had work the next day, I was really excited about spending the morning with her too. But when I woke up, her side of the bed was empty. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was in the bathroom or making coffee. I got out of bed and walked by the bathroom, but the door was open, and no one was inside. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I went to the kitchen, but it was empty too. For a second, I thought maybe she had just left, but her purse was still sitting on the coffee table, so she couldn't have gone far. Then I heard a loud bang from the other side of the apartment. My heart jumped, and I realized I hadn't checked the spare room that I'd turned into my makeshift office. I rushed over, pushed the door open, and froze. There was Rachel, standing over my laptop, hammer in hand, tears streaking down her blotchy red face. My laptop was shattered on the floor. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, my voice shaking with a mix of confusion and anger. She barely looked at me, just kept muttering, "I knew it. I knew I shouldn't have trusted you." Her voice was shaky, full of hurt, and she started accusing me of seeing other women behind her back. I was speechless for a moment, trying to piece together what she was saying. She kept going on about finding my dating profile, about how I had been meeting up with other women. But that wasn't true. I hadn't been on any other dates since I started seeing her. Sure, I had some lined up before we met, but I canceled all of them because I liked her so much. I tried explaining that to her, but she wasn't listening. She was too far gone, yelling that I was a liar, that I'd been using her. No matter what I said, it didn't make a difference. She was stuck in her head, convinced I'd betrayed her. She suddenly screamed that I'd pay for what I did, and before I could even react, she came charging at me, swinging the hammer. I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me, using all my weight to hold it shut. But it didn't take long before I heard the sound of the hammer pounding against the wood. Panic surged through me, and I realized I couldn't just stand there. I let go of the door and sprinted toward the front entrance, not even thinking about the fact that I was only in my boxers. I threw open the door and raced down the stairs, my bare feet slapping against the steps, and I started banging on the first door I could find. It swung open, and there stood an elderly woman, her face a mix of shock and confusion. I must have looked like a madman, but I pushed my way inside, practically begging her to call the police, all while trying to explain the situation. The look on her face said it all. She probably thought I was the one she should be calling the cops on. But I stayed by her door, keeping my hands in plain sight, hoping I seemed more desperate than dangerous. The minutes felt like hours, but finally the police knocked, calling out. I swung the door open, spilling out my story in a rush and leading them up to my apartment. They had me stay in the hallway while one officer went in to deal with Rachel. My mind was racing, trying to piece together how the night had gone so horribly wrong. After a few minutes, I heard shouting from inside and what sounded like a scuffle. When they brought Rachel out in handcuffs, she was wearing one of my t-shirts and the jacket I had worn the night before. Her eyes locked on me, and suddenly she flew into another rage, struggling against the officers, who had to calm her down again just to get her into the squad car. I just stood there, feeling like I was watching someone else's life. Once things quieted down, they walked me through my apartment, asking me to check if anything was missing or destroyed. The place was a mess. She had found my phone and smashed it to bits, and she'd also broken a picture frame in the living room, the one with a photo of me, my mom, and my sister. That picture meant everything to me, especially since my dad passed when I was just a kid. My mom and sister are all I've got left. And then they told me something that made my stomach drop. They found Rachel hanging off my balcony, threatening to jump. I lived on the second floor, so it wouldn't have killed her, but she could have broken some bones. It wasn't even concrete down there, just a patch of grass. Still, hearing that made me realize just how far gone she was. When it was all over, I didn't press charges. I don't know why. Maybe I felt sorry for her, or maybe I was just too exhausted to deal with it. The cops had their own charges anyway, since she bit one of the officers during the arrest. I still can't wrap my head around what happened, and I probably never will. Something was clearly broken inside her, something deeper than I could ever understand. I couldn't help but think she needed help more than punishment. In the end, I got a cheap phone to hold me over until I could afford something better. The picture? I replaced that too. I never heard from her again, and part of me hopes she's doing better wherever she is. But after all of that, yeah, I'm done with dating for a while. I need a break. I was 32 when this happened, but at the time, I was around 18 or 19. It was Valentine's Day, and I'd never had anyone special to spend it with, even though I started dating when I turned 16. Honestly, I was that girl who would post on social media about being single, hoping someone would feel bad enough to send me some attention. That year, I threw out another "Poor Me" post on Facebook, and I got a reply from this guy I barely knew. I don't even remember his name anymore, but I do recall he was good looking. He messaged me, saying he didn't have any plans either, and asked if maybe we should hang out. I laughed it off, but when he suggested grabbing dinner and catching a movie, I thought, why not? We set a time, and he offered to pick me up after I got off work. I told my mom I'd be crashing at a friend's place that night, and she gave her usual warning, "Be safe, Mija." He was supposed to show up around 7:30, and right on time, I got a text saying he was outside. I grabbed my stuff and headed down. When I got into his car, I was pleasantly surprised. He was even more attractive than I'd remembered. We exchanged small talk, and after a bit, he asked where I wanted to go. I lived in a small town in Georgia, so I said anywhere not too far from here would be fine. There were a couple of places about a 30-minute drive away. He suggested a spot a bit out of town. I knew the place, so it didn't seem weird at first, but we started heading in the opposite direction. Confused, I asked, "Isn't it the other way?" He casually mentioned that there was another theater he liked better and asked if that was cool with me. I felt a little uneasy, but I didn't want to seem rude, so I agreed. But then, things got strange. He turned down a road that was barely lit, and the houses around us looked like they were still under construction. All of them were dark, no lights in the windows, no cars in the driveways, just eerily quiet. Even if people were asleep, there should have been something, some sign of life. I started feeling a tight knot in my stomach and asked, "What is this place? Why are we here?" He gave me this sly grin, glancing over like it was no big deal. "Relax," he said. "I just wanted to spend some alone time, get to know you better." My chest tightened, heart pounding in my ears. That was the moment I thought I might not make it out of this. He pulled the car over and leaned in, trying to kiss me. I jerked back, saying, "No, I'm not into that." But he didn't stop. He grabbed my chest and said, "Come on, babe, it'll be fine." I pushed him away as hard as I could, my voice shaking as I told him, "We're not doing this." His expression darkened, and he snapped, "What the hell? No girl's ever said no to me before. You should be lucky I even wanted you." He kept saying it, over and over, like he couldn't believe I didn't want him. I froze for a moment, stunned that this was happening, but then I forced myself to speak. "Well, I guess there's a first time for everything," I managed to say, trying to sound braver than I felt. He stared at me, completely baffled. I could see the disbelief in his eyes. Here I was, a short, chubby girl, rejecting someone like him. Tall, fit, and used to getting his way. I could feel the tension building, and my mind was racing. Do I jump out now? How far am I from anywhere safe? I didn't even know where we were. I'm not religious, but I swear something was looking out for me that night because, after what felt like forever, he finally turned the car back on and sped off. He took a different road, and I immediately told him, "Take me home now. If I knew you were just looking for a hookup, I wouldn't have come with you in the first place. I kept talking, trying to fill the silence with anything that might keep him from losing it again. You should have been up front and let me decide. But he didn't say a word, just kept driving, his jaw tight. Finally, he stopped at a train station, but when I looked out, I realized it was closed for construction. I didn't care. I scrambled out of the car, slamming the door behind me. He sped off without another word, and there I was, alone in the dark, with no trains running. I called my best friend in a panic. She didn't hesitate, immediately ordering me a taxi and telling me not to worry about the cost. I don't think I've ever been so grateful for her in my life. Looking back, I should have learned my lesson about meeting people online, but I didn't. I still dated after that, though I made sure to never meet someone alone, especially at night. As for that guy, I blocked him as soon as I got home and never looked back. It was one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had. So, for a bit of background, I've never really had a proper long-term relationship before. I've gone on dates with a few people, but nothing serious. I'm bi, by the way, and I've never slept with anyone, either a girl or a guy. I'm a 22-year-old woman. A couple of weeks ago, like most people my age, I decided to give Tinder a shot, thinking it was about time to put myself out there. I like to think I'm pretty good at reading people, but I completely missed the signs with this guy. His name was David, and we matched 3 days ago. His first message was about wanting to meet me and my cat, saying we were both adorable. I liked his confidence, so I suggested we meet up. The first weird thing happened that same night. When I didn't reply right away, he texted asking if I was upset with him. I figured he was just a bit anxious, so I apologized for the late response, and everything seemed fine after that. We made plans to meet up at a bar the next night. That's when the second red flag came up. Where I live, you can't get into a bar if you're under 23, and I wasn't old enough yet. But David assured me I'd have no problem getting in. Turns out, he was wrong. The only reason the bouncer let me in was because my birthday was just a few days away, and he was feeling generous. David showed up a few minutes later. At first, he seemed pretty normal. Wore a brown jacket, sneakers, just your average guy. He ordered me a rum and coke and got himself a beer, and we sat down to chat. He told me a lot about his family, and I shared some stuff about mine too. At some point, we ended up playing darts, so I left my drink on the table. That's when things started to get fuzzy. I barely remember anything from our conversation after that until we were suddenly back at my apartment. I can vaguely recall us leaving the bar, getting into his car, and driving back toward my place. The rest of the night is just blank. You've got to understand, I don't usually drink much, but one drink doesn't knock me out like this. I rarely ever black out, and I've never completely lost a whole night before. That's why this is so strange. When we got back to my neighborhood, we decided to stop by the corner deli to grab something to eat. While we were inside, another red flag popped up. I thought I saw someone I recognized and told David I was going to say hello. But instead of coming with me, he awkwardly backed out and waited outside, not wanting to meet her. Turns out, I didn't know the person after all, so I went back to him and we walked toward my apartment. As soon as I opened the door, my roommate Sarah was coming out of her room. We greeted each other and had a quick chat. She mentioned she was about to take a shower, and David made this really weird "oh" noise in response. Sarah was kind of tipsy herself and started talking about some guy she was thinking of hooking up with. No big deal. That's just how she is. But something about David's reaction made me uncomfortable, especially with how drained I was feeling all of a sudden. I told him it was probably best if he left. He didn't argue or try anything, just left without even trying to touch me, which seemed strange at the time. That's where the night should have ended, but it didn't. A few minutes after he left, my phone started blowing up with texts from David. He said he was more open-minded like my roommate, called me boring, and accused me of not liking guys. He said there was no chemistry, and that he hoped we could have at least cuddled. I showed the messages to Sarah, and she gasped, but I was too out of it to understand why. She asked me if I realized what he meant by being more open-minded. That's when it hit me. He wasn't just insulting me. He was implying he wanted to sleep with her instead. It was beyond creepy. I started to panic. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how off everything was. One drink shouldn't have made me feel this out of it. That's when I began to suspect that maybe I'd been drugged. I was shaking as I told Sarah what had happened, and we decided to go to the police. We filed a report, but I chose not to get tested. I know that sounds strange, but unless you've been in that position, possibly drugged at 3 a.m., scared, embarrassed, and unsure if you're overreacting, it's hard to understand. The whole process feels a lot harder in the moment. That's how the night ended. Now I'm just terrified because this guy knows where I live, and I still don't feel fully right after whatever was in my system. Back when things were way more simple, before dating apps and smartphones took over, I used to spend a lot of time on these online chat rooms, the kind that ran on IRC. For the younger folks, that's short for Internet Relay Chat. You didn't have fancy profiles or pictures, just a username, and sometimes not even that if you joined as a guest. It was pretty anonymous, which was part of the fun. You could hop into rooms filled with people named Guest 345 or Guest 554 and have random conversations. It was a different time, and honestly, I kinda miss it. Nowadays, the internet's all about showing off who you are, so that level of mystery is long gone unless you dig deep into the darker corners of the web. But despite the anonymity, it wasn't uncommon to form connections, or even start relationships with people in these rooms. You could private message someone and talk one-on-one, so it didn't take long to feel like you really knew them. Of course, I'm sure some of the girls I chatted with were probably much older men, but that didn't matter much back then. It was all part of the game. I can say now that I was young or I didn't know better. But there was one girl I talked to who I actually had a real thing with for a while. Her screen name was something like a song title mixed with random numbers and letters, but I'll just call her Lily. She was a year older than me. I was 19, and she had just turned 20 when we started chatting. I can't recall exactly how we started talking privately, but it quickly turned into something more. Now, keep in mind, long-distance relationships were much different back then. Phone calls were expensive, and texting wasn't unlimited, so we mainly stuck to chatting online. We even emailed each other a couple of times. And before you say, maybe Lily was just a catfish, I can tell you with confidence that she was real. We traded photos, but not just normal ones. We did that whole thing where you'd hold up a sign with your username or the current date to prove it was you. Yeah, people had to get creative to show they weren't faking it back then. So, yeah, Lily was legit, and let me tell you, she was beautiful. Lily was the type of girl you'd expect to see in an IRC chat room back in those days. She had jet black hair, bright blue eyes, and was obsessed with wearing black. Everything she owned was in that color. She also had a few piercings on her face, and I was head over heels for her. I even told her she was the kind of girl I'd been dreaming about my whole life, and she found that hilarious. We decided to date after that, in the way that people did online back then. Every night we'd chat, send each other pictures, and while it never got too steamy, I was genuinely the happiest I had ever been. We kept this thing going for about 3 months. It was perfect, or at least it felt that way, until she just vanished. One day she stopped logging into the chat room. I didn't see her around at all. I tried emailing her but got no replies. At first, I thought maybe something had happened to her. Then, I started doubting myself. Maybe she'd lost interest, or maybe I did something wrong to push her away. I was really upset, thinking I'd blown my one shot at something special. Every night, I kept sending her emails, hoping she'd come back with an excuse like, "Hey, sorry, my internet was down," or "I've been away." Anything that would bring things back to how they were. Eventually, I did get a response, but it was super weird. It just said, "Hey, log into IRC." Seeing her message made me ridiculously happy. I jumped on IRC as fast as I could, and she immediately sent me a DM saying, "Hey." I asked her how she was, if everything was all right, but she didn't answer any of that. Instead, she just asked, "Hey, what's your address? I want to send you something." Now, I know what you're thinking. I was dumb. But back then, I was young, and I was really into her. so I didn't even think twice before giving her my address. If I had done that today, people would call me a complete idiot, and honestly, I deserve it. But at the time, there wasn't this big awareness about not trusting strangers online. So I sent her my address, hoping this meant we were taking things to the next level. What happened next wasn't what I expected at all. I'll never forget the reply I got after I sent her my address. It wasn't from Lily, but someone else. The message said, plain as day, "This is Lily's husband. Stop talking to my wife or you'll be next." And that was it. I didn't know what next meant exactly, but it was clear as day that this was a threat. I told him straight up that Lily never mentioned being married. I tried to play it cool, saying that if he was really her husband, I'd back off, no problem. After a long pause, they logged out, leaving me feeling completely wrecked and betrayed. That was the last time I ever saw that account online. Lily never logged in again, and she stopped replying to my emails. Just like that, our little relationship was over. But weirdly enough, the story didn't end there. About 2 weeks later, a package showed up at my house. There was no return address, just the name Lily written on it. No city, no details, just her name. I stared at it for a while, thinking something bad might be inside. And, well, I wasn't wrong. When I finally opened it and moved the packing material around, there was a kitchen knife at the bottom. The blade had this dried-up, brownish-red stuff on it, which I immediately thought was blood. I freaked out and called the cops right away, telling them I had received what looked like a bloody knife in the mail. Explaining that whole story to the officer when he arrived was a nightmare. I had to tell him about how I met this girl online, how we were sort of dating, and how her supposed husband had threatened me after I gave them my address. And now, out of nowhere, this creepy package shows up. Honestly, if I had told this story today, it might seem less bizarre. But in 2004, online relationships weren't as common, so the cop had a million questions. They even made me go down to the station for more questioning. I spent nearly 4 hours explaining everything before they seemed to believe me. They took the knife and told me they'd investigate. What they planned to investigate, I had no idea. All I had was her first name, her username, and a single picture. No last name, no phone number, nothing. I never found out if that blood on the knife was real or if they found anything at all. But one thing was clear. It was definitely meant as a warning. It finally hit me what that guy meant when he said, "You'll be next." Now, looking back on it after almost 20 years, I kind of miss the old days of the internet. This story is probably going to bring back memories for some of you older folks and maybe teach the younger crowd how things were. If there's one thing to learn from this, it's this. Don't give your address to people online. You could end up with a bloody knife in your mailbox. A few years back, when I was still messing around with dating apps, I had a bunch of bad dates. Awkward, weird, you name it. But there's one that still makes my skin crawl. It was with this girl named Sarah. We hit it off online, nothing too wild, just the usual chit-chat. We agreed to meet up the next day for dinner. When we finally met in person, she looked just like her profile. Friendly, easygoing. We chatted a bit outside before heading in to grab our food. The evening started off great. We got our drinks, ordered food, and settled into a comfortable conversation. Then, about 20 minutes in, I felt someone's eyes drilling into the back of my head. I brushed it off, thinking maybe they were looking at something else behind me, but I was sitting against the wall. No one else was there. I told Sarah, some woman a few tables over is giving me the death stare right now." She froze for a second and covered her face, muttering, "Is she tall, dark hair, wears glasses?" Her description matched perfectly. I confirmed, and then she let out this heavy sigh. "That's my ex." Now I didn't care about Sarah having an ex-girlfriend. That wasn't the problem. The issue was how this woman was looking at me, like I was one wrong move away from getting jumped. I asked Sarah if we should be worried. She shrugged and said, "I don't think so." Not exactly comforting. A few minutes later, the waiter brought our food. But just as we started to dig in, Sarah's ex stood up and made a beeline for our table. "Sarah," she said, "stop ignoring me. Stop." "I don't like this guy." Sarah turned pale, her hands shaking. It was clear their breakup didn't end well. Then, without warning, the ex grabbed my drink and hurled it at me. "Watch your back," she hissed before storming off. There I was, drenched, with my dinner ruined. The waiter rushed over, clearly having seen the whole thing, and promised to get the manager. At that point, I wasn't so much worried about the food or even the mess. I was more concerned about Sarah, and a little scared for myself. By now, Sarah was actually crying. I leaned in and asked what the deal was with her ex and whether we were in any real danger. I was already thinking about calling the cops if things got worse. She then told me that her ex, Beth, had become a full-blown stalker over the past year. Apparently, Beth had followed Sarah on every date she went on, wrecked her relationships, and even attacked her last boyfriend. Sarah mentioned it was just a stab to his hand, and though he survived, he broke up with her immediately after. She said every time she thought Beth had finally backed off, she'd show up again the moment Sarah tried moving on. The worst part? This had been going on for about 3 years at that point. Sarah had already filed a restraining order and contacted the police, but nothing seemed to stick. It was like the authorities were brushing it off as not serious enough. Sarah mentioned that the stabbing happened over 5 months ago, and she'd been hoping that Beth would leave her alone since then. Clearly, that wasn't the case. Beth was still around, and she was angrier than ever. When we finished our dinner and talked a bit more about the whole Beth situation, Sarah said it would probably be best if we didn't see each other again. She apologized, saying that if Beth ever truly disappeared, maybe we could give it another shot. I agreed, even though it was a pretty disappointing way to end the night. We went our separate ways after that. On my way home, I called my cousin to fill him in on what had happened. He couldn't stop laughing and told me that I had been played, that Sarah was just looking for a free meal and Beth was in on it. For a minute, I almost believed him. The whole situation felt like a weird setup, and maybe they were just good at acting. But then, the next morning happened. I woke up, grabbed my usual cup of coffee, and went outside to take my dog for a quick walk. That's when I saw it. Beth's final message. My car's windshield had been shattered, and all 4 tires were completely slashed. On the hood, in big spray-painted letters, it said, "She's mine." Obviously, I called the cops right away, filed a report, and dealt with the insurance mess. Luckily, my coverage took care of most of the damage. I even sent some pictures of the wreck to my cousin, asking if he still thought I was being scammed. He didn't laugh this time. After that, I never spoke to Sarah again. I didn't even bother letting her know what had happened to my car. I did tell the cops about the dinner and Beth, but they didn't seem to care much as usual. Every so often I wonder about Sarah, if she's okay, if she ever got out of that mess. I still worry that one day, Beth might actually lose it and hurt her for real. And to Beth, the most unhinged ex-girlfriend I've ever encountered, I hope we never cross paths again. I was 23 when this all went down. I'm a woman, and yeah, I'm also gay, which kind of ties into what happened. I had just started using Tinder, not expecting much. Whatever comes my way, you know? Everything seemed fine at first. A week or so later, I matched with this girl, let's call her Katie. She had her age listed as 23 as well, and I had set my filters to keep anyone under 21 out. Her photos looked right for her age, so I didn't give it much thought. The moment we matched, she messaged me. I didn't think it was weird at the time. Maybe she was just on her phone when the notification popped up. Honestly, it was a relief. Most of the other girls I'd matched with barely talked, and the whole awkward silence vibe made me feel strange too. Maybe that's just the deal with dating apps. Anyway, Katie broke the ice first, and the conversation flowed easily. She replied to every text in a heartbeat. At first, I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I was overthinking it. We matched in the afternoon, around 2:30 p.m. on a Sunday, and started chatting a bit. But I had things going on later, so I let her know that I wouldn't be able to text much for the rest of the night. When I got back home and checked my phone, I saw a bunch of messages from her, like 15 or 16. Some were just quick updates about what she was up to, others asking what I was doing. She told me goodnight twice and even hoped I was having sweet dreams. Then a good morning text showed up at 7 a.m. That's when things started to feel too much, like someone was breathing down my neck. Still, I didn't want to come off rude. Maybe she was just nervous, right? Maybe she hadn't talked to many girls she liked before. Looking back, I wish I had trusted my gut. But back then, I was so worried about coming off as mean. I've since realized it doesn't matter what others think if they give off bad vibes. If someone feels off, that's your cue. No more second chances. You just leave. At the time, though, I was still figuring that out. I had been in relationships before, but I knew some people hadn't. Maybe Katie was just one of those people, and that was why she acted this way. So, I kept being polite. I told her about my night and asked how hers had been. As usual, her reply came through within seconds, which was starting to make me feel weird. It was like she never put her phone down, and I started feeling like I had to answer right away too, just to keep up. If I didn't, she'd fire off more messages, one after the other. We talked for a bit more, and the conversation drifted to birthdays. I told her how happy I was to finally hit 23. That's when she casually mentioned that she was actually 20. Wait. What? Her profile said she was 23. When I asked her about it, she just brushed it off, saying it was a mistake and she couldn't fix it. That didn't sit right with me, especially because of what she said next. She claimed it was all in her bio, that she had clearly written her real age in there. But that was a straight-up lie. I had read her bio carefully before swiping, and there was no mention of her being 20. I called her out on it, and she insisted I must have missed it, telling me to check again. And wouldn't you know it, suddenly her bio had been updated to say, actually 20, not 23, right at the top. It was obvious she'd changed it just then to mess with me, hoping I'd buy her story. But I knew for sure it hadn't said that before. The whole thing left a sour taste in my mouth. I wasn't mad that she was 20. Honestly, that wasn't the issue. I just felt like I wouldn't have much to talk about with someone younger like that. But her lying and then trying to cover it up so quickly? That was the real deal breaker. If you accidentally put the wrong age on a profile, wouldn't you just delete the whole thing and start over? That's what I was thinking. So, I stopped replying to Katie, and eventually, I just unmatched her. I figured that would be the end of it. But of course, it wasn't. That night, I was swiping through Tinder when I saw her again. Same photos, same name, still claiming to be 23, but clearly a brand new account. The bio? Well, it was hard to miss. It was in all caps, saying, "Please talk to me. I'm sorry. I really liked our conversation." And the kicker, it mentioned me by name. That's when the real unease set in. She had made that account just to get my attention. I freaked out and put my phone down for a bit, trying to calm myself. Part of me wanted to just delete my account and be done with it, but I wasn't sure if that was the right move yet. I swiped left to make sure we wouldn't match, but by then, it was too late to report her. I hadn't really met anyone on the app that felt worth keeping it around for, so getting rid of Tinder wouldn't have been a big loss. Still, I found myself opening it out of paranoia, wondering if I'd see another one of her profiles. A couple of days went by, and there it was again. Another profile, with the same desperate message aimed directly at me. I couldn't believe it. I didn't live in a massive city with thousands of people, so the chances of seeing her profile pop up again and again were slim. She had to be making multiple accounts to track me down. That's when I knew I had to delete my Tinder. I didn't care about finding a match anymore. I just wanted this to stop. After I got rid of my account, I never heard from Katie again. Thank God. I still have no idea what her deal was, but the whole thing still makes my skin crawl. How many profiles did she make? Are they still out there? Is she still trying to find me somehow? And what was her endgame? What did she hope to achieve by lying about her age and coming on so strong? That was the first, and hopefully last, time I've had to deal with something like that. I'll never use Tinder again. Meeting people in person feels a whole lot safer after that nightmare. This actually happened to me not too long ago, and after hearing similar stories, I figured it was time to share mine. Here it goes. I'm in my late 40s now, and the closest thing I've had to a real relationship was with my kid's dad. I got pregnant when I was 16, and our parents basically forced us into marriage. We were just kids, barely knew each other, so it was rough at first. But we worked hard on making sure we were there for our daughter. Then, a little surprise came along when I was 30, and we had another girl, about 14 years younger than her sister. Luckily, the two get along despite the age gap, and I'm grateful for that. As for their dad, well, he had another side to him. He acted happy when our second daughter arrived, but at the same time, he was going through some kind of midlife thing and blew through our savings on his buddy's wife. Yeah, you guessed it. He was having an affair with her. Long story short, we divorced. Both girls decided to stay with me, so honestly, good riddance to him. Even though the divorce was finalized 2 years ago, emotionally, I'd been done with him years before that. I started feeling pretty lonely after that. My oldest daughter, Kayla, had already moved out, and the house felt empty. She's the one who told me to try dating again. Now, I'm not too tech-savvy, but Kayla set me up on one of those dating sites she used herself. I got a few messages, mostly from younger guys, which felt kinda weird. I mean, it's strange to think that men closer to my daughter's age were interested in me. But then, I came across a guy named Jason. He was 2 years older than me, had 3 kids, all around the same age as my youngest, and said his wife had passed away a few years ago. We started talking online, and after a few weeks we moved to phone calls. He seemed like a real family guy, which was comforting. I shared a bit about my life, my daughters, and how I ended up where I am. Jason was really interested in my girls, more than most guys I talk to. It's not often that men are keen on dating someone with teenagers still at home, so it was a relief when he asked about their names, ages, and even what they were into. After about a month of chatting, I decided it was time to meet him. We picked a coffee shop that we both knew well. When we finally met, we hugged, but then he immediately looked past me and asked where my youngest daughter, Leah, was. That threw me off. I told him she was in school since she was 15 at the time. His question felt off to me, considering he had kids around the same age who should have been in school too. I brushed it off, thinking maybe he was just eager to meet her since we'd talked about her a lot. We spent the rest of the day chatting before deciding to head out. Jason was sweet, really funny, and had this sort of charm about him. He actually reminded me a bit of a heavier-set Robert Downey Jr., and for someone in my age bracket, I felt pretty lucky. We kept talking regularly and met up again for dinner a few nights later. This time, Leah wasn't with us since she was staying at a friend's house after a school game. Jason mentioned her absence again, sounding a little bummed. Looking back, I should have found it strange. But in the moment, I thought it was nice that he was so keen to meet my daughter. I even suggested that maybe next time we could plan something with both our kids, and he seemed really into the idea. About 2 weeks later, my church was hosting a potluck dinner. Leah and I had already planned on attending, and since it was open to everyone, I figured it would be a good chance for Jason to join us, with plenty of kids around for his to hang out with. He agreed right away, and we set a plan to meet up there. When we arrived at the church that evening, I spotted him pulling up in his Jeep with just his youngest kid, who looked about 9 or so. I asked him where his other 2 children were, and he told me they were busy with something else. Kneeling down, I greeted his youngest, already knowing their name from our conversations, but they were really shy. I didn't think much of it. Kids can be like that when meeting new people. Before I could say more, Jason quickly shifted the conversation, asking where Leah was. I told him she was already inside, helping with setting up. We went inside and I introduced Jason to Leah. She'd heard a lot about him from me and already knew what he looked like. Leah's a sweet, outgoing girl, so when she saw him, she smiled and said hello right away. Jason, without hesitation, pulled her in for a hug. Leah, being her friendly self, hugged him back and even giggled a bit. I thought it was nice that they were getting along so well. But as the night went on, things started to feel off. While we sat eating, I noticed that Jason kept directing most of his attention to Leah, asking her all sorts of questions. They were eerily similar to the ones he had asked me on our first date. What she liked to do, her hobbies, her dreams for the future. At first I thought he was just being thoughtful, like he genuinely cared about her interests. But then, it took a strange turn. Right in front of me, he asked Leah if she had a boyfriend. That question hit me like a brick. Molly and I were really close, so I already knew she had a little thing going on with a boy from school. They'd even gone to a dance together. When Jason asked her, she admitted she was seeing someone, and he responded with, "Well, that boy sure is lucky to have someone as pretty as you." Molly smiled and thanked him, but the whole exchange made me uncomfortable. He kept asking her more personal questions, while barely engaging with me. When I tried talking to his son, Jason would either answer for him or completely cut me off. It felt wrong. Feeling uneasy, I stood up and collected our plates, taking them to the back. I wasn't gone for long, but when I came back, Molly quickly jumped up, saying she wanted to help me in the kitchen. It seemed odd, but I didn't question it at the time. I returned to the table, but Jason suddenly stood up, saying he needed to go. He gave me a quick, awkward hug before leaving. The whole night ended on this strange, uncomfortable note. On the drive home, I noticed Molly was unusually quiet. Normally, she's chatty after events like this, but this time, nothing. I asked her if something was wrong. She hesitated, took a deep breath, and just said no. But I wasn't buying it. I know my daughter too well. I kept pushing, determined to get the truth out of her. It didn't take long. Molly finally confessed that she didn't like Jason and didn't want me to see him anymore. Then, she told me what had happened at the church, and my stomach dropped. Jason had asked her if she was a virgin and if she had ever experimented with a boy or with herself. She didn't know how to respond, so she stayed quiet. But then he told her if she ever wanted to talk about it, she could come to him. I was sick to my core. Molly explained that she saw me coming back, and that's when she made an excuse to leave the conversation. She mentioned a few other small, inappropriate things he said, but that was enough. I felt disgusted. I had no reason to doubt her. My girls were happy I was putting myself out there, and Molly wasn't the type to lie about something this serious just to sabotage my relationship. I apologized to her over and over, promising that she would never have to deal with him again. That night, I sent Jason a furious message, telling him exactly what I thought of him, and that I was going to report him. He didn't respond. I went to the police, but they couldn't track him down. His profile had disappeared, and when I called the phone number he'd given me, it was disconnected. It was like he'd never existed. Even the little details about his life seemed fake. I didn't even know if that kid with him was really his. The thought that I had unknowingly brought someone so dangerous around my daughter terrified me. I kept my promise to Molly, swearing to myself that if I ever dated again, I'd make sure to do a deep background check before they met my girls. But honestly, after that, I'm okay with just focusing on them for now. About a year ago, I decided to dip my toes back into the world of dating apps after taking a long break. My friend convinced me to give it another shot, so I downloaded Hinge. After about 2 weeks, I matched with a woman who seemed really nice. We chatted for a while, exchanged numbers, and even had a video call. She was pretty, with long blonde hair and striking eyes. I enjoyed our conversations, and eventually, we agreed to meet up. For our first date, we chose a casual spot in town. She looked just as good in person, and although the conversation felt a bit stiff at times, I thought things went okay. We were both probably a little nervous, but overall, it was a nice night. Afterward, we parted ways, and she suggested we meet up again. I was all for it, so we kept chatting over the next few days and made plans for a second date. This time, we picked another local restaurant. Nothing too fancy, just a laid-back vibe. The second date went pretty much the same as the first. Pleasant, but still, that spark wasn't fully there. As we wrapped up the evening, she asked if I wanted to come over to her place for a bit. It wasn't late yet, maybe around 9 p.m., and she said her place wasn't far. I agreed, curious to see where she lived. We both got in our cars, and I followed her out of the parking lot. At first, it seemed like we were heading back into the main part of town, but then the drive kept going. 10 minutes turned into 15, and soon we were driving along a quiet, rural road. On either side of us, there was nothing but empty fields and patches of dense trees. The road was completely deserted, no other cars in sight. After what felt like 20 minutes, we finally turned onto a narrow dirt road. We finally reached the end of the dirt road, and she pulled onto a long, narrow driveway. The place was surrounded by thick woods, so I couldn't see much of anything at first. As we got further up, I spotted a small 2-story house tucked away behind the trees. It wasn't exactly what I expected, kind of run down with chipped paint and a sagging porch. It didn't match the picture I had of her in my head at all, and honestly, the whole setup was starting to give me a weird vibe. I had no idea where I even was anymore. I hadn't been paying attention to the route, just blindly following her. She got out of her car, and I followed suit. "You actually live here?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She just laughed and shrugged like it was no big deal. "Yeah, what's the problem?" she said, heading toward the front door. I trailed behind her as we walked through the overgrown yard. The place felt abandoned, but she unlocked the door and stepped inside like it was the most normal thing in the world. We stopped just inside the door, standing in total darkness. None of the lights were on, and she didn't make a move to switch them on either, which felt strange. I started feeling around the wall for a light switch, but before I could find one, she gestured toward a staircase. "You can head downstairs if you want," she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. I squinted through the dim light and saw the stairs she was talking about, a steep, creaky wooden staircase leading down into what looked like a basement. "Do you have any lights down there?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She just smiled and said, "We'll turn them on when we get down." That was it for me. Something about the whole situation was just off, and I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. I was still standing near the door, so I just turned, opened it, and stepped outside without saying anything. She didn't try to stop me, but I could hear her footsteps behind me. As I walked toward my car, I realized she was following me, her pace quickening. My heart started racing. Without thinking, I broke into a sprint, rushing to my car. I fumbled with my keys, unlocked the door, and jumped inside. Just as I was about to pull away, I saw her standing in front of my car, staring at me. She wasn't yelling or angry, just smiling this eerie, unsettling smile. She waved, that same creepy grin still plastered on her face, and that was the last straw. I backed out as fast as I could, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. My hands were shaking, but I managed to pull onto the road and drive away. After a few minutes, I had to stop and figure out where I was. I pulled out my phone, punched in my location, and finally found my way back home. That night still haunts me. Out of all the dates I've been on, that one will always be the most unsettling. A few years back, I matched with a guy on Bumble. His name was Ryan. He had short brown hair, a light scruff, and in his pictures, he looked decent. His profile didn't give away much, but after we matched, he messaged me. It started simple, just a "hey," and I said hello back. Our first few exchanges were pretty basic. "How are you? What's up?" But soon we found a better rhythm. He seemed like he enjoyed the outdoors from his profile. We kept chatting, and he came across as pretty easygoing. After a couple of days of on and off conversation, he suggested we meet up. I asked where, and he picked a small Italian spot in town. I agreed, and we planned to meet there at 7 p.m. the next night. The day of the date, we texted in the morning to confirm everything. It all seemed good. So I started getting ready and left my place early, since the restaurant was only about 10 minutes from my house. I'd never been there before, but it looked cozy and had a fair number of people inside when I pulled into the parking lot. It was 6:50, and I wasn't sure if Ryan had arrived yet. I checked Bumble, but there were no new messages from him since I told him I was heading out, and he replied with a "sounds good." I waited in my car until 7 how, then decided to go inside. I thought maybe he was already there or still on his way. I grabbed a table and told the host I was waiting for someone. I sent Ryan a message saying I was seated. A few minutes passed and still nothing. I felt a twinge of annoyance but tried to stay calm. By 7:15, I messaged him again, asking if everything was all right. No reply. I stayed until 7:30, and when I still hadn't heard from him, I decided to leave. I got back into my car and started driving home, frustrated. But about halfway there, I noticed a car that had been behind me for a bit. I didn't remember seeing it at the restaurant parking lot, but it had been on the same road as me since I left. I wasn't really paying attention to the cars around me at first, but after I made a couple of turns, it stayed right behind me. I didn't start to feel uneasy until I made the final turn onto my street, and the car followed. My neighborhood is pretty quiet, not much through traffic, so the fact that this car was still behind me sent a chill down my spine. I pulled into my driveway. My house was the third one on the right, and the car kept going, but it was moving slowly. I got out of my car, watching as the headlights crept down the street. It was so dark, I couldn't make out the driver's face. A small part of me wondered if it could be Ryan, but I quickly shook that idea away, telling myself that was ridiculous. I checked Bumble when I got back inside, and Ryan still hadn't replied. I sent him one last message. What happened? Why didn't you show? Then, I just tried to move on. It wasn't like I knew him well, but I was mad. He set up a date and then totally ghosted me. So, I made myself some noodles, sat down in my living room, and tried to relax. I lived by myself at the time, and while I was eating, I glanced out the window. I noticed what looked like the same car from earlier driving down my street again. This was about 30 minutes after I'd gotten home. The car was going the other direction, but when it reached my house, it slowed down and pulled over to the curb. I froze, watching from the window without moving the curtain, hoping whoever it was couldn't see me. It was definitely the same car that had been tailing me. The engine stayed on for a while before finally shutting off. My heart started racing. I didn't waste any time and called the police right away. I explained that I thought someone had followed me home and was now parked outside. I kept my eyes on the car, but no one got out. I still had no idea who was inside. After the call, I continued to watch. The car stayed there, dark and silent, under a nearby streetlight. For the next 10 minutes, nothing happened. No one moved. Then, I saw a police cruiser turning onto my street. It crept closer. Then the officer flicked on the patrol lights when they were near the car. The cop got out and approached the driver. I watched them talk for what felt like forever, but was probably just 5 minutes. Finally, the car started and drove away. The officer came up to my door and told me the driver said he was lost and had just pulled over to check directions. He swore he hadn't followed me home. My gut told me that was a lie. I grabbed my phone and pulled up Ryan's Bumble profile, asking the officer if the guy matched his description. He nodded. It was him. My stomach dropped. Ryan had followed me all the way back to my house. I explained to the officer everything that had happened, but he said there wasn't much they could do unless Ryan came back. The officer told me he asked Ryan to leave and not return, but couldn't force him to do anything else. He advised me to call if Ryan showed up again. After the cop left, I was still shaken. The thought of Ryan coming back freaked me out, but thankfully, he didn't. I blocked him on Bumble after that. I couldn't believe he had followed me home after completely ghosting me. It still gives me chills, but I'm relieved that I never saw or heard from him again. When I was around 16, I could already feel the cracks in my parents' marriage widening. My mom and dad were both seeing other people, though they probably thought I didn't know. I tried to keep them together, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't last. My mom had been planning her exit for a while, and on my 18th birthday she finally handed over the divorce papers to my dad. They agreed to stay under the same roof until I finished high school, just to make it easier on me. By the time I turned 19, my mom was already chatting with a new guy she found on some dating apps. She even downloaded a messenger app I used, called Signal, to talk to him. One night she fell asleep with her phone unlocked, and I saw her messages. I won't say his name, but I saw his face pop up on her phone screen more times than I care to admit. I didn't think much of it at first. A couple of months later, my dad and I decided to grab some food together. His friend, who knew all the local hangout spots, called him up and suggested we stop by a nearby bar. My dad was always friendly with the bartenders and other regulars, so he was cool with it. The bar was more of a relaxed lakeside spot where people parked their campers. It wasn't the shady kind of place you might expect. That night, a guy named Alex introduced himself to us. As soon as I saw him, something clicked in my brain. I'd seen this man before, on my mom's phone. I didn't tell my dad right away. I thought maybe I was just imagining things until Alex looked me straight in the eyes and said my full name, even though no one had introduced us. He knew everything, first, middle, and last name. It freaked me out. Alex got weird fast. He came over to my table, trying to make me scratch lottery tickets for him, and his hands kept brushing up against me, lingering way too long. At one point, he even tried to touch my legs. I was frozen, too stunned to react, but when he noticed people were watching, he finally backed off. After that, I did some digging. I searched his name on Google and Facebook, and that's when I found out the truth. He wasn't just some random guy. He was a registered sex offender who had done time in a neighboring state. The man sitting across from me was the same man I was staring at on my phone screen. He only lived about 20 minutes from our town. I pulled my dad aside, heart pounding, and told him that this guy, Alex, wasn't who he said he was. I showed him the picture and all the info I found online. As the reality sunk in, I broke down in the bathroom, tears streaming down my face. The way Alex knew so much about us, our names, where my dad worked, it just didn't sit right. My dad was visibly shaken, but he refused to step outside with Alex, who kept trying to lure him out under the excuse of wanting to check out my dad's truck. Alex eventually gave up and stepped out to smoke. The bar manager, sensing something was off, immediately locked the doors behind him. Everyone inside, mostly regulars who knew my dad, had noticed how weird Alex had been acting, especially how he'd been touching me earlier. The manager didn't waste any time and called the cops. Alex must have realized he'd been found out because he tried to leave before the police arrived. He didn't get far. My dad followed him down the road, trying to make sure he didn't slip away. But Alex wasn't in any state to make a clean getaway. He ended up crashing his car into a snowbank just a little up the street. The cops arrived shortly after and arrested him for driving under the influence. He was taken to the county jail, which was just a short drive from where we lived. That night, I barely slept, and for weeks after, every little noise would jolt me awake. If Alex knew as much about us as it seemed, he probably knew where we lived too. To make matters worse, he was out on bail just a couple of days later. The police found all kinds of disturbing stuff in his car: duct tape, drugs, a crowbar, rope. It was clear he had some sick plans. He was also hit with charges for breaking his probation. Turns out he was a Tier 3 sex offender, which meant he'd committed a violent assault against a minor and was supposed to be monitored for life. He wasn't even allowed to be out of state, let alone have any social media, but he'd still managed to slip through the cracks. I pressed charges for sexual harassment and got a restraining order against him. But the most terrifying part? Later on, through phone records, I found out he'd driven past our house more than 20 times in the week leading up to that night. He'd been at my dad's job and even near my school multiple times over the last 6 months. He'd been following us, watching us, for who knows how long. I've never been through something so terrifying. I've since moved across the country, putting as much distance between me and that place as possible. But my family still lives there, in the same town where it all happened. Alex still hasn't been arrested for the stalking and harassment charges. He knows he can't come back because there's a warrant out for his arrest. But that doesn't stop the worry. Since then, I've become so careful about my online presence. I don't share my full name anywhere, and I'm paranoid about who has access to my personal details. If there's one thing I've learned, it's to be extra cautious about who you meet online. You never know who's hiding behind a screen or what their real intentions are. I used to think that living in a small town with a population of only a few thousand would keep me safe from stuff like this. But now I know it can happen to anyone, anywhere. Around 8 or 9 years ago, I went through a pretty rough patch where I was feeling incredibly isolated. Lonely might not even be the right word. It felt more like I was desperate for some kind of connection. I've been in a few long-term relationships, but right after turning 31, I spiraled into this deep sadness. The guy I thought I was going to marry bailed on me, saying he wasn't ready to settle down. This was after we'd been together for almost 5 years. He claimed it was commitment issues, but I'm sure he just found someone else. I'm still bitter about it, but I've come to terms with the fact that I have to let it go. He's not really the focus of this story, though. After that breakup, just a couple months later, I hit rock bottom. I was in that mindset where I needed someone around me, anyone, right away. That's when I caved and made an account on one of those online dating sites, probably whatever was trending back in 2012 or so. I can't remember the exact one, but it was a nightmare to navigate. It kept throwing matches at me that were complete opposites of what I was looking for. I know people say opposites attract, but that's not what I needed at the time. I scrolled through profiles that were just wrong for me, sending a few messages here and there, but feeling like it was all pointless. Then, I stumbled upon this guy named Jake. Physically, he was everything I wanted. Tall, dark hair, and even shared a lot of my interests. He was the type to wear band t-shirts in every photo, and I remember thinking, finally, someone who gets it. I clicked the interested button, hoping he'd do the same, and to my surprise, he did. I was pretty excited and shot him a DM almost right away. I started with something cheesy like, "Wow, your hair looks amazing. I wish I could get mine to behave like that." Yeah, I know, it was kind of lame, but I was genuinely jealous. He replied almost instantly with some joke about making a deal with the devil to get his hair that smooth. His sense of humor was quirky, and it made me like him even more. Sure, I might have been in a weird place, craving companionship like I mentioned, but something about Jake felt different. I had this gut feeling that he could be the guy I'd been searching for, that maybe we could have something real. It might have been a bit much to think that way after just a few chats, but I couldn't shake the feeling. We started talking on the phone soon after, and the more I got to know him, the more I found myself drawn to him. He had this incredible voice, and he told me he used to be in a band that did okay locally but never really hit it big. On top of that, his last job was at an animal shelter, where he would spend time with pets that had to stay overnight. The more I learned about him, the more I adored everything about him. But, as I kept learning all these wonderful things about Jake, I couldn't help but wonder, why was he still single? He was funny, talented, good-looking, and he loved animals. What was the catch? I couldn't hold back any longer and asked him directly. He kind of dodged the question at first, saying things were complicated. Not exactly the answer I was hoping for. So I pressed him a bit more, wanting to know what he meant by complicated. Finally, he told me he had been married, but that things had fallen apart, and now he wasn't. It sort of made sense then. He had been in a serious relationship that ended, so now he was out there looking for someone new, like me. I could definitely relate. We ended up chatting about our past relationships for a while. Well, mostly I talked about mine. He seemed a little guarded when it came to talking about his, but I figured that made sense. It probably hadn't been that long, and he didn't want to dive into it just yet. I didn't push. It felt good to unload some of my frustrations, and Jake was great at listening. He had this way of helping me see things from a different angle, which I really appreciated. Then came the day we finally planned to meet face to face. We picked a Saturday morning at a cozy little cafe downtown. When I arrived, he was already seated in the back, waiting for me. Meeting him in person felt surreal. He looked exactly like his pictures, which was a relief. Same laid-back vibe, same quirky humor. I had been half worried I'd get catfished or something, but nope, it was really him. We spent a few hours just sipping coffee and chatting. Time flew by, and before I knew it, it was already past noon. I mentioned I probably needed to head home soon, but casually threw in that I'd love to grab dinner with him sometime. That's when he said he'd had a great time too, but something about his body language changed. He looked down at the floor, like something was bothering him. I asked if everything was okay, and after a pause, he said there was something he needed to ask me. Without thinking much of it, I told him, "Sure, what do you need?" He looked a bit sheepish and said he needed a ride. That's when it hit me. I hadn't seen him drive up when I got there. He must have been embarrassed, which, honestly, I found kind of endearing. By this point, I felt pretty comfortable around him, so giving him a lift wasn't a big deal at all. Plus, I was already starting to imagine this could turn into something long-term, so I didn't mind doing a small favor for him. I smiled and said it was totally fine, but I playfully asked why he hadn't mentioned not having a car earlier. He just chuckled and said he didn't want me to think less of him. After thanking me, we walked out to my car, and I started driving him home. As he gave me directions, we talked more about his life, and he opened up a bit more than before. I asked if his breakup had been tough, and that's when he dropped something I wasn't expecting. He said, "Well, we didn't actually get divorced." Hearing him say that hit me like a punch to the gut. It all clicked. He wasn't actually divorced. He was still married. Maybe they were separated, sure, but if they weren't officially divorced, there was always a chance they could work things out, and where would that leave me? It felt like my heart sank right there in the car, and I just kind of went quiet, half listening as he rambled on about how bad things had gotten between them. Meanwhile, I was barely paying attention to the directions he was giving me. Then he told me to make one last turn, and suddenly, we were pulling into the parking lot of a police station. I parked, confused, scanning the area, trying to understand what was happening. I asked him, "Why are we at a police station?" He didn't answer right away, just stared out the window at the building like he was somewhere else entirely. The whole vibe felt off now, and honestly, I was starting to feel really uneasy. Finally, he turned to me and said he'd really enjoyed the time we spent together, that I was a wonderful person, and he was sure I'd find someone great. Then he dropped the real bombshell. He told me he was about to walk into the station and confess to something terrible, something that was going to put him away for a long time, probably for the rest of his life. He said if things had turned out differently, he would have loved to spend more time with me. I was floored. I didn't even know what to say. I asked him what he was talking about, what he had done, but all he said was that it was an accident, that he never meant to hurt anyone. Then he opened the door, got out, and walked towards the station without another word. I just sat there, frozen, watching him make his way inside. He walked right up to the front desk, calm as could be, and started talking to the clerk. After a minute, a police officer came up to him, cuffed him, and led him away. I didn't move. A few minutes later, another officer came out to my car. He asked if I knew the man who had just walked in, how long I'd known him, and if I had any idea what was going on. I told him we'd met online a couple weeks back and that this was our first date. The officer asked more questions, basically grilling me about Jake, and I answered everything as best I could. Then he told me something that nearly knocked the wind out of me. Jake had just walked in and confessed to killing his wife. I was speechless. I thought he was divorced, or at least in the process of it. After talking a bit more, the officer gave me a card, took my details, and told me I was free to go. As I drove home, it all started to sink in. That's when I realized he hadn't said ex-wife because she wasn't his ex yet. She was dead. I had just spent an entire morning with a murderer. I'd even driven him to the station so he could turn himself in. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Was our date just his way of getting a free coffee and a ride? Or had he actually been interested in me? Either way, it scared me to my core. Not because he'd been creepy or dangerous toward me, but because the whole time he'd seemed so normal, so together. He was calm, funny, even sweet at moments. But this guy had killed someone, and I had no clue. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. Not in the way you'd expect, but in the realization that you never really know what someone is capable of. I deleted my online dating account right after that and never looked back. My name's S. I'm 25 now, but this goes back a few years. Back then, I was 19, awkward as hell, and spent way too much time online. It was around 2016 or 2018, can't recall exactly, but I was just coming out of a really bad relationship. Honestly, it left me messed up and I wasn't trying to meet anyone new. But this story isn't about that ex. I was really into this app called Geek Chat. It was a weird little place for role-playing, kinda my escape back then. I started using it around 15 or 16, and it was a big part of my life. They eventually pulled it off the App Store because of some really sketchy stuff, like rumors about creepy users, or even the app's creators. Not sure which, but that doesn't really matter. I met a lot of folks on there, including someone I'm still friends with today. But this story? It's about someone named Mike. Mike and I clicked right away. I dropped the whole role-playing thing with him pretty fast since he was easy to talk to. Too easy, honestly. He was into some weird stuff, though. Big into erotic role-playing. He kept pushing it during our chats, and looking back, it was gross. I found out he was just a year older than me, and he lived somewhere in Kansas while I was in North Carolina. The distance made it seem like we'd never meet anyway. Mike didn't have much going on in his life. He had no plans for college and was obsessed with becoming a voice actor. His days revolved around video games, weed, and, well, other stuff I'd rather not mention. I guess I was naive and lonely, and it was easier to deal with him than real people. So yeah, we ended up dating. I graduated high school online, and before I knew it, we were together. Sort of. We never met in person, but we talked about it a lot. We kept it a secret from our families, especially since Mike thought my parents would hate him. They're pretty judgmental, and honestly, he wasn't wrong. The secret relationship dragged on for a while, and once I started college, everything seemed to fall into place. I felt like I had control over my life for the first time. Feeling secure, I opened up to Mike about my past, about the awful things I'd gone through with my ex. Huge mistake. He didn't react the way I thought he would. Instead, he started asking me these weird, unsettling questions, like he was more interested in the details than my feelings. I'll never forget him asking me if I enjoyed what happened when my ex assaulted me. He started asking if I'd done stuff like that with my ex, and the whole thing made me super uneasy. But I convinced myself he was just curious or trying to understand me better, so I brushed it off and said no. A few nights later, though, he dropped a bomb on me. He confessed that he got off on thinking about what my ex had done to me. Worse, he said he wanted to do it too. Specifically that he wanted to anally rape me until I bled. He went into graphic detail, talking about how he'd take my anal virginity, since he couldn't take my actual virginity. I was horrified, and he could see that, but instead of apologizing, he got angry. When I told him how upset I was, he flipped out and told me to get over it before hanging up. I felt like I was the one who had done something wrong, so the next morning, after crying myself to sleep, I was the one who apologized. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, why I felt like I deserved to be treated that way. Then college kicked off. I moved into the dorms and wanted to experience campus life like any other freshman. I was trying to reinvent myself, to leave all the baggage behind and start over. But Mike didn't like that one bit. He'd always pick fights whenever I had plans to go out, and if I didn't answer his texts right away, he'd blow up my phone, accusing me of cheating. He called me awful names and constantly said I was sneaking around with guys from my classes. I should have seen all these red flags waving in my face, but I didn't. I thought I was in love, that this was just part of a relationship. I'm bisexual, so I'm into both men and women, and Mike used that against me. Before we started dating, he'd been doing erotic roleplay with a bunch of other girls online, and I told him I wasn't comfortable with it anymore. But he said it was unfair of me to ask him to stop. He twisted it, saying that because I'm bi, I'd be fine sleeping with girls, but he should be allowed to ERP with other women, and I shouldn't be upset. It was so messed up, but somehow, I accepted it. I don't know why I put up with it. I wasn't even interested in anyone else, just him. But slowly, I stopped going out, stopped participating in anything on campus. Soon, I was too depressed to even attend my classes, and I ended up failing my first semester. My parents were furious, and honestly, I couldn't blame them. I promised them I'd turn things around after winter break. Little did I know, That break was going to change everything in ways I could never imagine. When we were visiting some family down in Alabama, which was about a 2-hour drive from Mike, we made the dumb decision that we'd finally meet up, and I'd stay with him for a couple of weeks before heading back to school. My parents weren't happy about it, but I was set on making it happen. So, in January of 2019, after secretly dating for around 6 months, we met for the first time, and let me tell you, it was awkward. My parents got a hotel room, and Mike's mom came to pick us up for dinner because Mike didn't even have a driver's license. We ended up at an Olive Garden. While we sat there, Mike casually dropped, "Oh, by the way, S and I are dating." His mom barely reacted, just nodded and said something like, "Yeah, I figured. You talk about her all the time." Then we all just went back to eating like nothing had happened. After dinner, his mom had to run some errands, and we tagged along. We stayed in the car while she went into a store, and that's when things started to get uncomfortable. Mike began touching my leg in the back seat. I didn't like it because his mom could have come back any second, but he kept going. When she finally went inside, he leaned over, started kissing me, and his hands wandered up to my chest. It wasn't what I expected. He was rough, squeezing too hard, and it hurt. He pulled back, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and then unzipped his pants. I immediately told him I didn't think it was a good idea, but he kept pushing. He said I should just suck it a little. I still hesitated, saying no, and that's when he told me that if I didn't do it, he could always make me. He said it'd be easier if I just went along with it. So, I gave in, terrified of what he might do if I refused. His mom returned a few minutes later, none the wiser, and we went back to the hotel. That night, his mom told my parents about our relationship, and all hell broke loose. My mom lost it, screaming, crying, saying all sorts of things I still regret hearing to this day. Mike and his mom left, planning to pick me up the next morning so I could stay with them for the rest of the month. That night was one of the worst I've ever had. My parents yelled at me for hours, and when I tried to sleep, my mom stood over me, staring as I laid there. I didn't sleep at all, just laid there, wide awake. The next morning, at exactly 8 a.m., Mike and his mom showed up to get me, and my parents took off back to North Carolina. His mom dropped us off at his late dad's old house, then headed back to her place, leaving Mike and me alone. I was exhausted. All I wanted to do was sleep. I got into his bed and closed my eyes, hoping to finally get some rest. Mike slid in beside me, holding me tight, and asked if I was okay. I told him I didn't feel well and that I just needed to sleep, but instead of letting me rest, he held me tighter and whispered, "I know something else that'll make you feel good." I knew exactly what he was hinting at, so I asked if we could just wait, explaining I was too tired after everything. All I wanted was sleep. I was beyond exhausted. But then, Mike got up from the bed, his face twisted with anger. He started packing up my things, my laptop, clothes, everything, shoving them into my bag like I was being kicked out. He snapped at me, saying I might as well go home if I wasn't going to make him happy. I started crying because he knew I couldn't just go back. There was no way for me to leave. I didn't want to leave, and I didn't want to deal with the fallout. So, I let him do what he wanted. It felt like I wasn't even in my body anymore, just watching from the outside, disconnected. Afterward, he pulled me close, kissed me, and said he loved me, that I was amazing. Then he rolled over and went to sleep. I just laid there, crying silently. That whole month is a blur. We bounced between his mom's house and his ex-stepdad's place. He kept drugging me, forcing himself on me over and over. I felt trapped, stuck in this never-ending nightmare. By the time I finally left, it was like none of it had even happened. My mind blocked out so much. I took a bus home and lied to my parents. I told them everything went fine, that Mike was sweet and respectful. I couldn't admit they'd been right. I couldn't face the shame of it all. The next 2 years were a mess. I went to community college, but I kept failing my classes. Mike was always demanding my time, blowing up my phone if I wasn't responding every second of the day. He'd threaten me if I didn't talk to him, telling me how worthless I was, how I didn't deserve someone like him. But things started to shift about a year into college. I met a new guy, just a friend at first, but he was kind in a way I hadn't experienced in years. He had a crush on me, but it wasn't pushy or creepy. He just treated me like a person, and that was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Slowly, he helped me see how badly Mike was treating me, how toxic it all was. His kindness was a wake-up call. Eventually, I found the strength to break up with Mike. It wasn't easy, but I knew I deserved better, and I credit that friend for helping me see it. If not for him, I might still be stuck in that horrible situation. Now, he and I have been together for almost 3 years, and I'm genuinely happy for the first time in ages. As for Mike, if you ever come across this, I hope you get help. I hope you can somehow fix the messed up person you are. But honestly, I hope I never see you again. Good luck with that. A few years back, I used to spend a lot of time on some niche websites. These were kind of like smaller versions of big social media, not as well known. There was one site in particular I really liked. It was all about this massive multiplayer game that had a decent following. I mostly stayed in the background, reading what others were saying, but after a while, I decided to join in on the discussions. That's when I met someone who ended up becoming my long-distance online girlfriend, Rebecca. At the time, I was pretty young, around 19, and didn't know much about online relationships. But Rebecca and I clicked right away. We had a lot in common, and it was easy to talk to her. We were both the same age and shared some personal struggles, which made things feel even more natural between us. We quickly grew close, talking about everything through private messages on the site. Eventually, we decided to try something more serious, and I was beyond thrilled. I wasn't the kind of person who had a lot of luck with relationships. Before Rebecca, I'd only dated one person, and that was back in middle school for a few months. This felt different, though. Our relationship started on the game forums, but soon we moved our conversations to email. We felt it was a more private place to talk about things we didn't want to share on a public forum. We emailed constantly, sometimes late into the night. After some time, I suggested we connect on social media, Facebook to be exact, so we could chat in real time. That's when things took a weird turn. Rebecca said she didn't have Facebook, that it wasn't safe to use because they were watching. I didn't really get what she meant at first, so I asked for more details. She explained that if you had a Facebook account, you were being tracked by someone, some organization. I thought it was a bit strange, but I didn't push it. I figured everyone has their quirks, so I just let it go, and we kept talking through email. A few weeks later, Rebecca asked if I could send her a picture. She said she felt like she was really falling for me and wanted to know what I looked like. I was flattered, and a little nervous too. I grabbed my mom's old digital camera, took a quick selfie, and sent it to her. It wasn't a great picture. Actually, it was probably one of the worst photos I've ever taken. But I hoped it would do the job. When I sent the picture, she replied almost immediately, gushing over how much she was in love with me. She kept pouring on the compliments, telling me how incredible I was and how much she adored me. I was on cloud 9. It felt unreal to have someone I barely knew showering me with all this attention, making me feel better about myself than I ever had before. Now, you might be wondering when things started getting weird. Well, that part is coming soon. Up to this point, everything seemed pretty harmless. Looking back, though, there were a few things that should have raised red flags. I wasn't reckless with my personal info or anything, but I wasn't exactly super cautious either. Rebecca knew my first name, and I'd mentioned the first letter of my last name in passing. She also knew the town I lived in, but not much else. Outside of the picture I sent, that was pretty much all she had on me, or so I thought. I figured there was no way she could find me in real life with just those few details. But I was wrong. A few weeks into our online relationship, she went completely silent. No emails, no messages. At first I was worried, but honestly, the excitement of the whole thing had worn off by then. I realized that most of our conversations were just her complimenting me over and over, and after a while, it kind of lost its charm. I assumed she had gotten bored or found someone else, so I didn't dwell on it too much. Then came that strange Saturday afternoon. I was at home, sitting in the living room, messing around on my computer. I remember playing The Sims, completely zoned out, when there was a knock at the door. I figured it was just the mailman or a neighbor, so I didn't think much of it. I got up, walked over, and opened the door without a second thought. Standing there was a man I didn't recognize. He was smiling at me, this big weird grin like he was way too excited to see me. Before I could say anything, he said my name. Not just my first name, my full name. And then he let out this strange, high-pitched squeal, like he was genuinely thrilled to be standing there. It was such an odd noise, like a kid who just met their favorite celebrity. I just stared at him, completely confused. I had no idea who this guy was or how he knew me. I just kind of stood there staring at him and blurted out, who are you?" That's when he dropped the bomb I'm sure you've all been waiting for. "I'm Arnold, but you know me as Rebecca online." My stomach instantly twisted. Standing on my doorstep was this middle-aged, balding guy with a belly, and this was my online girlfriend. Rebecca had always told me she was my age, described herself in detail, but she'd never sent a picture. Now I knew why. Not once did she, or rather, he, mention being an older guy, let alone one who'd track me down in person on a random Saturday. I stammered, "Wait, you're Rebecca? The one I've been talking to?" He smiled awkwardly and shrugged. "Yeah, I guess I'm not exactly what you expected, huh? But it's me." Things only got worse from there. Just as I was trying to wrap my head around this nightmare, my dad walked into the room, asking who was at the door. I panicked inside, trying to think of what to say. How was I supposed to explain to him that this guy, pretending to be a 19-year-old girl online, had found me and was now standing at our front door? I tried to brush it off, saying it was just some random guy, but Arnold cut me off, looking directly at my dad. "I love your son. I drove almost 10 hours to see him." I can't even describe the look on my dad's face. He was first shocked, then furious. The next few minutes were a blur of confusion, shouting, and me wanting to disappear. Arnold, or Rebecca, or whatever his name was, kept insisting that we were in love, that he'd come to take me with him, and that we'd live together. His words just kept getting creepier, and I wanted to crawl into a hole and never come out. My dad finally had enough. He told Arnold that if he didn't leave immediately, he'd be calling an ambulance, for him. After some yelling, and my dad threatening him with worse, Arnold finally backed off. The police were called, but since Arnold hadn't technically broken any laws, no inappropriate messages, no threats, they couldn't do much. He was told to leave and not come back, and that was it. He drove off. That was the last time I ever heard from Rebecca. I blocked his email and tried to erase the whole thing from my mind, but it was too late. The damage was done. It completely wrecked my ability to trust anyone I met online. Now, years later, I've wised up and I'm a lot more careful. I don't really have any desire to make online friends anymore. And honestly, every time I meet someone online, the thought crosses my mind that they're probably a 50-year-old balding guy sitting in front of his computer. It's a running joke now, but back then, it wasn't funny at all. I still shudder thinking about it. A few years ago, something truly bizarre happened to me. I was around 21 at the time, though I'm now 25. It all started when I was using Tinder and matched with this guy. Let's call him Jason. At first, things seemed cool. We chatted for a bit, and he came across as nice, even charming. But after that first night, things shifted. The next day, his attitude turned cold, and he made some offhand remarks that rubbed me the wrong way. I wasn't into it anymore. Then he asked for my Snapchat, and when I said no, he got irritated. He started going off about how I was making a mistake, and even had the nerve to ask me out the next night. I wasn't expecting that, so I just kind of laughed and said, "Really?" But he didn't seem to be joking. He gave me a time and told me to meet him at some bar downtown. I didn't reply and hoped he'd take the hint. The next day, he messaged again, all confident, saying, "I'll see you tonight." I thought about telling him off, but I decided to just ignore him instead. He kept quiet for most of the day, but that night, he sent me a message on Tinder asking, "Where are you?" I rolled my eyes, thinking he was joking, and didn't respond. Not long after, another text came through. "Why didn't you show up?" I started wondering, did he really think I was going to meet him? I had never agreed to anything. Then the next day, his last message dropped. "I'm going to find you." That one made my skin crawl, so I blocked him immediately. At that time, I was living in a small rental house with a roommate. It wasn't anything fancy, just 2 bedrooms, but we each had our own space. The very next night after all of this, I was home alone because my roommate was working late. It was around 11 p.m., and I was lying on my bed, scrolling through my phone, not really thinking about anything serious. Then I heard something. It sounded like a rustling outside, maybe from the bushes near my window. My room wasn't that big, and my bed was close to the window, which was covered with an old blanket instead of curtains. I peeked under the blanket, and my heart almost stopped. I saw a guy crouched by the bushes, just a few feet away from the window. I stumbled back in shock, not believing what I was seeing. I mean, who expects that? After maybe 10 seconds, I heard a tap on the glass. He was knocking. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and dialed 911 as fast as I could. The tapping kept going, but I couldn't see him anymore. As soon as I hit call, I bolted out of my room, running down the hall toward the living room. As I reached the doorway, there was a loud bang from my bedroom window, like he was trying to smash it. My mind raced. Was he going to break in? I breathlessly told the 911 operator that someone was outside my house, trying to get in. In the living room, I felt a tiny bit safer, but still far from calm. I wanted to put as much distance between me and my bedroom as possible. The operator reassured me that officers were on their way. I went to one of the front windows, barely pulling back the curtain to sneak a peek outside. He was still there, standing by my bedroom window now. I had no idea what he was doing, but then he turned. For just a second, our eyes met through the window. I froze, and as he started to move, I yanked the curtains shut and backed away, my heart pounding. I sprinted to the bathroom and locked myself inside, my body shaking as I waited for the cops. It was dead quiet in there. I couldn't hear much, but I figured if he broke in, I'd know. After what felt like forever, I finally heard the police outside. I ran out of the bathroom, straight to the front door, and let them in. One of the officers told me they had caught someone in my backyard. Turns out, it was the same guy I had matched with on Tinder. He had been lurking around the back windows, who knows for how long. I still don't know what he was planning, but I can't believe I went through all of that. After that night, I deleted Tinder for good. If you're on dating apps, be careful. It's not always harmless swiping. This whole thing kicked off when I started feeling pretty worthless. I don't want to get into too much, but just know I was at rock bottom and I needed something to lift me up. That's when a buddy of mine threw out the idea of trying Tinder. Now, I'm not really into hookups, but maybe it was my low mood or his constant pushing that made me cave in. "Dude, you just need to hook up with someone," he said. His words, not mine. So, I downloaded the app, not expecting much, but figured why not give it a shot. I set up a profile, swiped right on a few girls, and waited. Nothing. No matches at all. My already fragile confidence took another hit. I was seriously thinking about deleting the app when, out of nowhere, I got a notification. A match. Her name was Emma, 26. Her picture showed a girl with messy blonde hair and light brown eyes. Not gonna lie, she was stunning. Way too pretty for me, the kind of girl you'd think would swipe left without a second thought. But she matched with me? I took a minute to, first, thank the universe for whatever miracle this was, and second, hope I wouldn't screw things up. I stared at the screen for way too long, trying to figure out what to say. A cheesy pickup line? Or just a simple, hello? Before I could decide, she messaged me first. "Hey," she said, with 3 Ys and a wink emoji. She mentioned seeing my profile and asked about my dog. "He's so cute. What's his name?" she wrote. I made a mental note to give my dog, Rocco, extra treats for helping me out with this one. I told her his name and his breed. "Oh, he's adorable, just like his owner," she replied. Yeah, I was blushing hard at this point. Then she dropped something unexpected. "So I don't normally do this, but I really like our chat. Want to meet up sometime?" My heart raced as I saw those words pop up on my screen. This was unreal. Trying not to sound too eager, I responded, "Yeah, that sounds great." Hopefully, I didn't come off as too desperate, but nope, it wasn't that simple. After we nailed down the place and time, the big day finally rolled around. I won't lie, I was a nervous wreck. I just hoped the tidal wave of sweat pouring out of me wasn't going to soak through my shirt. I went for a casual look, something decent but not over the top. I brushed my teeth about 3 times, showered like it was my last one ever, drowned myself in deodorant, sprayed on some cologne, and threw a mint in my mouth before heading out the door. When I pulled up, I realized the spot was a rundown motel. Nothing special. Honestly, I felt a bit thrown off, but hey, she picked the place, right? My mind immediately went to all the wrong places, but I wasn't exactly thinking straight at that point. I got to the door of the room and took a deep breath, trying to hype myself up. This was it. I knocked, hesitating just a bit, but nothing happened. I knocked again. Still nothing. My heart started sinking a little. Was she not here? Maybe she was running late? I pulled out my phone and shot her a quick text, asking if she was close by, but nothing. No response. I thought about just waiting around a little, figuring she'd show up any minute. After half an hour, though, I was about ready to give up. Pretty sure I'd just gotten pranked. But then, I heard it. A phone ringing from inside the room. "Emma?" I called out, knocking again. This time, I pressed my ear to the door, listening closely. And then, the door creaked open, and before I could react, a hand grabbed my arm. Definitely not the small, delicate hand of a girl. This was a rough, strong hand, like a guy's. I panicked. Instinctively, I yanked my arm back and slammed the door on the dude's wrist. I heard him yell out in pain, but I wasn't about to stick around to see who it was. I took off, bolting down the hallway toward the elevator, slamming the button like my life depended on it. I glanced back, and that's when I saw them, 3 guys running straight at me. Without thinking, I shoved the stairwell door open and started leaping down the stairs, practically falling with each step. I hit the ground floor, sprinting past the front desk without even looking at the clerk. I blasted through the front doors and made a beeline for my car. I didn't stop to see if they were still after me. I didn't care. I jumped into my car, keys already in hand, and locked the doors the second I was inside. Only then did I feel like I could breathe again. After sitting there for a minute, trying to get my head straight, I finally started the car and drove off. On the way home, I deleted Tinder for good. To Emma, or whoever the hell was pretending to be Emma on that app, I don't know what your deal is, but I really hope you never get away with whatever it is you're trying to pull.